It is 3 minutes after 10. A very good morning indeed to you. It's Thursday, so Mystery Hour will be upon us at 12. I think in the next hour we're going to do a topic inspired in part by a caller from earlier in this week. I wonder if you can guess which one it is. But we're going to begin with a bit of a strange one, okay? We're going to begin by knitting together 2, 3, possibly even 4 separate but associated stories. We will begin with the announcement from the Member of Parliament, Caroline Lucas, that she is stepping down as an MP at the next election. She, of course, remains the only Member of Parliament ever produced by the Green Party down in Brighton and Hove. I have to say, I don't know how much attention I was paying at the time, but when she became an MP, I thought it might be the beginning of a new era of green politics in this country. I thought she might be, if not the sort of beginning of an avalanche, then certainly the beginning of a trickle. And she stayed there. She's been there since 2010 and has done an astonishing job of bringing these conversation and these issues into the mainstream. But she has had enough and is moving on to pastures new. I think she wants to get involved in more sort of, if you like, obviously active engagement with the issues as opposed to the political position as a one-woman band on the back benches. I don't know. I'll read a little bit more about her resignation statement to you shortly. Remarkable what she reflects on: 5 prime ministers, 4 general elections, 3 major referendums, 2 Tory leadership coups, and and a global pandemic. So that's story number 1. Story number 2, you just heard in the bulletins, the wildfires that are raging throughout Canada, pumping smoke southwards, rendering New York almost uninhabitable at the moment. Jodie Comer, you remember her, the wonderful actress, had to stop a play last night on Broadway because of breathing difficulties. The information that has been given to New Yorkers sounds like something that might be associated with some sort of form of chemical warfare. You couldn't see across, I don't know how familiar you are with New York City, but there's a river that separates Manhattan from Brooklyn, famously the sort of the bridge. And you couldn't see one side from the other. It's a wider river than the Thames, isn't it? But still, I mean, that notion is quite incredible. And that, of course, is going to be linked to climate change. The world is getting hotter. Something else that brings us to the third story that I would knit into this morning's question. Even if greenhouse gas emissions are sharply reduced, the Arctic will be ice-free in September in coming decades. There will be no ice in the Arctic seasonally, forevermore, according to the experts. If emissions decline slowly or continue to rise, the first ice-free summer could be in the 2030s, a decade earlier than previous projections. And the research shows that 90% of the melting is the result of human-caused global heating. Natural factors account for the rest. Someone mentioned yesterday that Tufton Street is already getting its teeth into the net zero conversation. Any politician or public figure who has spent the last couple of decades trying to persuade you that you should punch yourself in the face in a electoral booth, or that making rich people richer and poor people poorer would somehow help you, despite the fact that you're not a rich person. Anybody who has sought to demonize refugees or pretend that having regulations and protections in place for consumers was somehow oppressive or wrong. Anyone who's encouraged you to become part of the first population in human history to vote to impose economic sanctions on itself, or put Liz Truss into Downing Street, or believe that Boris Johnson might somehow change his spots after a lifetime of moral depravity upon getting into Downing Street, or letting Kwasi Kwarteng loose. Any of that lot, almost guaranteed they will be jumping on the let's oppose net zero next bandwagon. Keir Starmer facing difficulties from within his own ranks for taking relatively tentative steps in what is obviously the right direction. But here we are. The Green Party in other countries, other European countries, is now a major electoral player, a major player. I mean, a kingmaker still, more than a king. But in this country, I think that Caroline Lucas's decision not to stand again, I think that probably a Green candidate will still get in Brighton and Hove. I think she's sort of broken the the paradigm there. But it's a really odd one, isn't it? You've got this growing sense, and also when it turns out that there's a chap called Dale Vince. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was on with Nick the other day, and I got to tell you, this doesn't happen very often. I came into the studio because I inherit Nick's inbox when I come into the studio, and Dale Vince was getting some serious love on the. I didn't hear the interview myself, but my goodness me, it was. There's nothing more. What's the word I'm looking for? Yesterday I had to deal with all Lewis Goodall's fan mail when he joined me for Prime Minister's Question Time. There are more distracting things when you're in the studio than other people's fan mail, but they're not helpful. It's not helpful to stumble into other people's fan mail when you arrive at work in the morning, but there was a lot of fan mail coming in for Dale Vince, and he's in the news because he gives money to Just Stop Oil and the Labour Party. Yeah, I'll say that again because me neither. That's controversial, apparently. Tories are putting tens of millions of pounds into their own family's bank accounts after setting up companies and 3 weeks later getting hundreds of millions of quids in public money. But Dale Vince, a self-made man, gives some money to Just Stop Oil and some money to the Labour Party. That's, whoa, stop that. Whoa, hold the front page. Seriously, don't scare the horses. That's big news, apparently, in the United Kingdom in 2023. Would it be big news if the media wasn't dominated by people that had encouraged you to back Brexit, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng? I don't know. Probably not. But anyway, I mention him because that is, something that is controversial still in this country. Just Stop Oil, environmental protesters, some of their tactics unpopular, plenty of politicians who agree with their aims, disagree with their tactics, but they represent, along with Extinction Rebellion, the most successful attempt to bring their agenda into the spotlight, which is perhaps why so many people are so spooked by it. So there it is, the single biggest issue that our species will ever face, which is environmental damage. It's right there. The gathering evidence, the gathering storm, if you like. In many ways, the centre of the free world, New York City. You can barely breathe in New York City this morning. You've got apocalyptic warnings from the Arctic where the ice is melting and will never return. It's become too late to save Arctic summer sea ice, says Professor Dirk Notz of the University of Hamburg. Now, I mean, use that, even if, like me, you don't have a deep understanding of the facts and the ramifications, just use it as evidence of how hot everything is getting. So in some ways, it's the same story, isn't it? Fires raging in Canada and ice melting in the Arctic. And yet, in this country, I want to focus on this country, particularly, the Green Party remains very, very much a fringe operation, despite having some great operators, some great activists and some great ideas. And I know some of the answers are obvious. I think proportional representation is probably the most obvious one of all. But Caroline Lucas has been the MP for Brighton and Hove for 13 years in a first-past-the-post system. So it's not the beginning, the middle and the end of the story, or indeed the question. 12 minutes after 10 is the time. Why? I've got two questions, actually. So the first is fairly obvious, given what we've just been talking about. Why do you personally think, the Green Party has not kicked on from Caroline's election in 2010? That's the crucial question. Why has it not kicked on? I don't remember what I said at the time, but I'm pretty sure I thought that she'll be the first of at least a few. That there is a game change in place here, a new party which is going to become more relevant and more important with every passing year. Not one of those parties that gets set up as a splinter breakaway group from an established party, but a new party with an entirely new rationale and an urgent agenda for change, gets into Parliament in 2010, and we thought that perhaps it would be the beginning of something significant. It hasn't been. Simple question, why not? 0345 6060 973. And I want you to talk to me about messaging, not just about electoral systems. I might take one call on electoral systems, but don't waste tenpence queuing up to talk to me about proportional representation. It's an obvious part of this story, an obvious answer to this question. But also, if the urgency of the situation had been communicated to enough people in enough constituencies, they would have followed Brighton and Hove and elected a Green MP. So why is it not happening? And I'll take any answer you've got on that, because I think it's a really important and very interesting question. You can even, if you wish, go for some of my greatest hits and explain the role that the media has played in essentially keeping people in the dark. In New York this morning, quite literally in the dark, because the atmosphere is so smoky that the sun can barely be seen. 13 after 10. And then the second question, and this is a question for the ages. This is the $64,000 question. Whenever I say the $1 million question, I've got a very pedantic correspondent who always complains. The figure of speech, I believe, is the $64,000 question. What should or could they do differently? And I'll take, again, anything you've got on that. Should they be giving up on having a party of their own and seeking instead to exert more influence from within other parties? Should they be deploying different tactics? Should they be aligning themselves with more radical outfits like Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, getting involved in more direct action, running the risk, of course, of getting arrested? It can't be a coincidence, can it, that Jenny Jones in the House of Lords, who we spoke to yesterday, is leading the fight against this government's attempt to ride roughshod over hundreds of years of parliamentary tradition and overrule Parliament on a whim, the whim being that a Secretary of State should be able to decide what is a peaceful protest and what is not, which is kind of scary, really. It should be a statute book issue, that. And it's a Green politician in the House of Lords that is fighting that battle. Probably not a coincidence. Which protests are, at the moment, most likely to draw the most heat, the most attention? Answer: environmental protests. So the politicians have tried, and while they haven't failed, they haven't enjoyed anything like the sort of success we might have expected to see in 2010. And the, what would you call it, the sort of guerrilla wing of the environmental movement remains pilloried by almost every corner of what we'd have to call the mainstream media and, of course, the fringe media. All sorts of signposts here towards worrying scenarios in the future and, I think, confusing scenarios in the past. So why does the Green Party not enjoy a much greater profile in this country, given that the issues about which they care most and upon which their entire movement have been built have never, ever, ever been more urgent? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. And again, like yesterday's opening hour, this is, I don't want any calls from people who dispute the science. Sorry. I mean, there's plenty of places you can go. They're even setting up television stations for people like you now. So I think we can, state of my listening figures, we can agree to disagree. I'm interested in answers to my question. I suppose people who dispute the science are part of the problem, given that they are the sort of fodder of Tufton Street and right-wing media. But I always remember reading absolute no-marks in the Daily Telegraph 10, 15, 20 years ago. And even when I wasn't particularly engaged in this issue, I remember thinking, why are they publishing them alongside? And did someone who's done history at Oxford, writing articles about climate science, poo-pooing 90 to 95% of the canon of actual climate? It's just bizarre. It's like a precursor, wasn't it, for COVID and Brexit and so many other things where idiots were allowed far too much room in the public space. But that's not what today's about. Today's about this. Why have the Greens not done more since Caroline Lucas was elected to Parliament in 2010? And what should they be doing differently? And of course, to acknowledge who's listening, what should you be doing differently? Why haven't you done more? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's 17 after 10. 20 minutes after 10 is the time, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Dave from Truro says, I'm just concerned that a vote for the Green Party would be a wasted vote and help the Conservatives remain in power. So there's going to be technical questions, philosophical questions, political questions. Sadly, James, I think the majority, this is Bobby in Bristol, I think the majority of the electorate's short-term selfish and opting for denial. It's as simple as that. The tide is shifting, but it's a hefty, chuffing tide. Lovely turn of phrase, Bobby, if you don't mind me saying so. Simple questions, complicated answers. Although simple answers also welcome. Why has the Green Party not pushed on more since they got their first MP back in 2010, Caroline Lucas, who's just announced she's standing down? And what could they be doing differently? Josh is in Warrington. What do you reckon, Josh?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on again.
You're very welcome, mate. What's on your mind?
So I think for me, I think not going into the proportional representation discussion, which I promise I'll try not to do.
No, we can do, but I mean, we could talk about nothing else, and I don't think that would be very helpful. No one disagrees that proportional representation would make a huge difference to the Greens. It would also let in, I was going to say fascists, but they get in anyway, don't they, these days? But it would let in even more fascisty fascists.
True. So notwithstanding that, I think the Green Party probably are undeniably a force for good, and I think with Caroline Lucas standing down, it is a shame. But I think some of the party's challenges are, a lot of their optics are obviously around green agenda, fixing the sort of environmental problems that we face. And those are noble, just things. But I think in a world that's also still sadly riddled with post-COVID problems, a faltering health system, cost of living crisis, on some of your texts, I think people are thinking, well, yeah, it's great that you want to fix the climate, but if the manifesto is very front-heavy about making rivers not flood, and someone's like, yeah, but I still can't feed my kids, and
it's horizon stuff, isn't it? It's horizon stuff.
Yeah.
That is, and I guess as the horizon gets closer, so to speak, then the problem diminishes. So in New York today, people probably a little bit more conscious of the world getting hotter than they would have been a month ago.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is where the proportional representation does sort of tangentially come in, because if you have someone in the public thinking, well, I would give the Green a vote, but I don't think the way they present themselves, their shop window, gives me enough confidence that, as well as championing climate change for the good, they can also handle when the economy goes south. Have they got the right skill set across the party? And they're not too specialist on fixing, yes, an important thing, but quite a specific scope. And I guess this is where, if it was proportional representation, you'd have the more thoroughbred across all the parties, all the specialisms.
Yes.
And then the Green having their say.
And that probably explains. So it's chicken and egg in a way, isn't it? Because if there was proportional representation, then possibly they'd get propelled to a position where if you suddenly took away proportional representation, they'd actually be okay because they'd made so many inroads and so much progress. I'm interested in the horizon question, because here's a theory, here's a speculation. If you got all of the media outlets in this country, specific to this country, that have spent much of the last 20 years trying to demonise people born elsewhere, right? If all of those front pages, I've been looking back over the Daily Mail's front pages in the sort of 3 weeks running up to the referendum vote, apart from taking a morning off after Joe Cox was assassinated by a man who largely agreed with the Daily Mail's editorial position on immigration. It was staggering, even to me, that if those front pages talked about things like Arctic sea ice and global warming with the rhetoric and the passion, if you like, that they talk about people born in other countries, would that turn the oil tank around? I mean, if they used all of their powers that they use for evil, if they suddenly started using them for good, would they still work? Would they still be powers?
That's a great thought.
It is, isn't it?
You'd hope
we should crowdfund and buy the Telegraph, Josh. We could start the fight back starts here.
100%, and you would hope that. And this is where it's a strange box you've opened, because of the culture wars that probably don't exist to the extent these right-wing outlets suggest they exist to, but they know that it's what divides people. They know it's what keeps them present, and there's all the people who sort of fund it and stuff. I think you're right. I think if more of the media had equal coverage and people were actually putting problems in the front page that will actually affect all of us, irrespective of class, creed, political ideation, then maybe more people would actually turn around in coffee shops and think, actually, I'm less bothered about what women are using men's rooms and vice versa.
Yes.
We've actually got a real problem about trees will exist in.
That would just be an interesting experiment, wouldn't it? Just to literally put the same energy into reporting on the environment that you put into reporting on transgender toilets and see what happens. Instead of asking politicians whether or not a woman can have a penis, ask them how they feel about the fact that the summer ice in the Arctic, one of the key components of the Earth system, has gone. I mean, it's literally gone. It's the first major component of the Earth system that we are going to lose because of global warming. But hey-ho, down with e-scooters. I don't know, and we'll never know. But I would be up for crowdfunding You know why the Telegraph is for sale? Because they can't pay their debts, the owners of the Telegraph. So these are the same newspapers that run articles about how young people can't afford to buy houses because they eat too much avocado and spend too much money on Netflix. They're now having their assets essentially confiscated by bailiffs and stuck up for sale to the highest bidder. Jane's in the Wirral. Jane, what would you like to say?
It's a problem and the solution, I think.
Good grief, get you.
Well, yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest problems the Green Party got, and I should come clean, I accidentally became the co-chair of my local Green Party.
Accidentally?
Yeah.
So what? You walked through the wrong door?
No, I was about 3 years ago, round about Spike Ups. I decided that Labour was no longer representing me, and I resigned.
Fair enough.
And they didn't. My local Labour Party didn't take my resignation as fact. So I thought, what can I do? I know you get chucked out if you either do something really dodgy or you join another party.
That's right.
So I joined the Green Party and told them I joined the Green Party.
Just to underline your resignation, as it were.
Precisely.
Oh, I love it. And then you ended up deputy chair.
No,
co-chair.
Co-chair. I went to a few branch meetings. I timed it.
Did you put your hand up by accident?
No. So I'd been to. It was on. It was in the middle of COVID, so it was on. Meetings were online, and I joined. I went to a few meetings. They go, "We need a chair," and I go, "Well, I've been in the party about 15 seconds. But I'm prepared to give it a lash."
Fair enough. And there you are.
So I ended up accidentally becoming the co-chair of. So I'm job sharing with the guy who wanted to retire because on the grounds that I literally knew nothing, and it would be a good idea if I felt my way.
Never hold Nadine Dorry's back. She's about to end up in the House of Lords, and I suspect rather more than she does, simply by dint of being sentient. So what is holding back the Green Party, and what is the solution?
Well, So I'm blurring, going around this bit, but one of the reasons I did join the Green Party, I'm a long-term environmentalist. I really should have been in the Green Party, but I believe that in order to make a difference, I had to sort of focus on national politics, and hence I was in Labour. I've been a Labour member for 35 years. Right. It's not like a but anyway, the astounding thing was, whenever I did one of those surveys that say, who should you vote for?
I'm conscious of the time, Jane, and it's partly my fault, but we're still in the autobiography stage of this phone call.
Okay, so basically, if I get to the punchline,
if you would,
the Green Party has absolutely fantastic social policies that nobody knows about.
Okay.
The social policies are more progressive than the Labour Party, and there's a gaping hole developing in progressive politics, is my view.
As Starmer tacks to the right.
I think he's gone past centre. He's heading up towards where the Tories were about 10 years ago.
I'm hearing that a lot. So the Green Party, actually, the problem is the green. It's not easy being green. You need to focus on the stuff that's not most obviously green, but is more generalised social policy.
Precisely. And the Green Party always gets publicised. It's all about the environment. It's equally about the environment and social equality. And that doesn't get out there. So that's what we need to do.
That's a brilliant point. No, you brought it in.
I think that's it.
You brought it in bang on time. Are you going to stay on as co-chair of the Green Party?
Yeah, absolutely. I've gone beyond that. I'm now going to stand as a candidate. So
deliberately or by accident?
This is deliberate.
Okay, just checking, because you know what happened last time. It's coming up to 10:30. Thank you, Jane. So there is part of the problem. That's what I mean about trying to just steer it away from PR a bit to find out more interesting things. Like, for example, me being proof of Jane's point this morning by talking about the Green Party solely and exclusively in the context of environmental policies. The environment is on fire. Why is the Green Party not doing better? Well, part of the reason why the Green Party is not doing better is everybody thinks that it's interested only in matters environmental. So there's a sort of weird circularity to the conversation so far. It's almost chicken and eggish, isn't it? And yet, as Jane reminds us, most of us probably don't know about the social policy platform that the Green Party pursues. And again, with proportional representation, they would be policies that could be bartered with in return for electoral pacts or forms of coalition government. It's just gone 10:30. Lottie Morley's here now with your headlines. 33 minutes after 10. More on that unfolding horror story in France as it happens. 6 children and an adult injured in a knife attack in a town in the French Alps I actually happen to know well. I mention that only because stories resonate more. It's part of the human condition. If you're familiar with the locale in which the story is unfolding. It's weird. It's why your ears prick up if you hear your hometown mentioned in the news. But Annecy is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. I mean, it's breathtakingly beautiful. And it is there that at least 3 of the knife attackers' victims are now in a critical condition in hospital. About 9:45 this morning, a man armed with a knife entered a children's playground. near the town's famous lake and attacked a group of children aged around 3 years old as they played. It's one of those stories that almost defies belief, isn't it? And as I say, he's been overpowered by the police and arrested. More on that when we get it. Several people, including children, have been injured. This is the French Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, have been injured by an individual armed with a knife in a square in Annecy. French public radio, France Info, has reported that the man was aged 32, carrying Syrian identity papers and was an asylum seeker. 10:34 is the time. Alex is in Newcastle to steer us back to the question of the Green Party, and I don't think it's an unfair question. I think we're asking it responsibly, but given the escalating environmental situation, the Green Party's failure to garner more electoral support in this country, what do you think it's down to, Alex, and what can they do about it?
Hi, thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
It's a very interesting question. I think there's different avenues to this. So the first one is obviously money. The Green Party has nowhere near as much money as all these other bigger parties, and that plays a huge difference. The second one is about media, as you've talked about already. For example, if it comes to no new oil, we have a very clear outline for how we can get away from oil and gas and fossil fuels in the latest IPCC report, but still in the media it's still presented as a debate in the same way that climate change was presented as a debate for 40 years when it wasn't.
Yes.
So it's hard. If it was treated as an emergency in the media in the same way that COVID was, then we wouldn't have this issue. We wouldn't have these conversations. We would just get on with the job and we'd fix it.
I'd like the COVID parallel because there were and still are some deeply deluded people trying to pollute the discourse about COVID. And yet they didn't get picked up by the Daily Mail or the Daily Telegraph, or I mean, there's some on the lockdown side of things. There's room for dispute, but not on the actual existence of the virus and the lethality of the virus. It's a really good parallel that because, albeit that there are a few people who went a bit crackers, that. It's not the same because major news organisations didn't get on the COVID denial bandwagon in the way that they have with the climate change denial bandwagon.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons for that, before I go on to my third point, is, one, with COVID, we always had a clear sort of villain, right? It was
you
the
could
virus.
see it in front of you as well every day. You could see it.
With the climate crisis, the villains are shrouded. They're like the 1% who's polluting insane amounts and subsidising oil and gas. They're the oil and gas companies who own the press. So, of course, they're not going to write bad stories about oil and gas, right?
Yeah, no, I get that. So what's the third one? That's money and media.
Human psychology. So I'm not an expert on this, but this is just some of my theories. Politicians are short-term thinking. Yes. And they don't want to say things like, because of the climate crisis, our lifestyles are going to have to change in certain ways.
So so where we're heading towards is, why aren't there more votes in being green? Well, the answer is that there aren't more votes in being green.
Well, it's not quite that. Currently, our economic system is based on infinite growth, right? But you can't have infinite growth with finite resources. It's a very simple thing. So we have to end infinite growth in order to deal with the climate crisis. Yeah. But nobody wants to admit that because they're worried that that's going to be unpopular. So instead of trying to have the debate, instead of trying to have the argument, they push the can down the line, hoping that somebody else will do it instead.
Well, it's worse than that in a way. If you look at Liz Truss's brief foray, a brief period in power in Downing Street, she was sort of trying to weaponise the pursuit of infinite growth in a finite universe to levels that had never actually been reached before. So the lessons there are far from being learned. So I know that this isn't necessarily part of your theorising. What if you were in charge? What would you do differently?
Well, see, what it comes down to is being more bold. People don't really know the full extent of it because we're in this business as usual mind frame, right? And it's hard to be standing outside of business as usual and talking about the climate crisis. Everyone thinks, oh, he's insane, or we have other things to worry about, the cost of living crisis, the Ukraine war, so many other things. Obviously, there's so many distractions. So nobody wants to focus on this, and nobody wants to be the one who speaks out. I mean, look at, for example, Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil. They have garnered so much hate, not just because of their tactics, but because of the way that the media represent them. So nobody wants to be in that situation. So even scientists they sort of downplay it and they hope that somebody else will pick it up instead and really try and clearly communicate the climate crisis, because they don't want to be the one which gets all the Daily Mail hatred onto them.
And there is lots of it. There is indeed lots of it. Thank you, Alex. That's a really thoughtful contribution. A little bit more of what Caroline Lucas has actually said about her decision to stand down. She talks about her time in Parliament and not being able to focus as much as I would like on the existential challenges that drive me, the nature and climate emergencies. And as these threats to our precious planet become ever more urgent, I now want to concentrate more fully on these accelerating crises. Rupert Reed, who is also a senior Green, of course, describes it as an indictment of our politics this morning and as presaging a new and, if it's possible, even more vital role for Caroline in the desperate and exciting years we are coming into. And I have to say it was Rupert, actually, who drew my attention to that Arctic ice story, which is fairly remarkable. Oddly, speaking of politicians who have taken something of a stand on matters environmental, I am expecting to speak to the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, imminently, not about ULEZ, although I'm sure that will pop up next time he's here to take your calls, but about his very public objection to the idea of a barge for people born overseas being moored outside or being moored in the London docks. Sadiq Khan made it pretty clear he's deeply opposed to that. I thought we'd try and find out a little bit more about why. This is a barge full of people born overseas and seeking asylum in the United Kingdom being confined to a barge in the docks next to London City Airport. I'm not quite sure when we're getting him, but I think it's sooner rather than later. Do I go to Bob in Broxbourne? Or do I wait and see whether the Mayor is now on the line? Very subject-specific this morning, Sadiq Khan, as opposed to some of our more wider-ranging conversations. You have vowed to block plans to house hundreds of people born elsewhere who are seeking asylum in this country on a barge at the docks next to London City Airport. Why the vow, and how likely is it that you can effect the block?
Well, it's astonishing. I mean, your listeners will know for decades, dare I say centuries, we've been a safe haven for those fleeing persecution, asylum seekers, refugees. And what the government's proposing, as we understand it, is to house these vulnerable people. Some of them have been tortured, some of them travel a long time, some have been trafficked, some may be the victims of modern slavery on these mega barges. And I think there are real concerns. Put aside what we think about the actual illegal immigration bill, about the health, about the safety, about the well-being of housing these people on a barge. But also there's a practical context, which is where is the help they will need, the doctors, the GPs, the healthcare, the schooling, the English lessons and so forth. And I think this is a really good example of the government playing on people's fears and coming up with solutions that aren't solutions. They compound the problem. So,
I mean, you're obviously going to reject fairly robustly any accusations of NIMBYism, but the suspicion will remain that you're all in favour of proposals or whatever it may be, as long as it's not happening on your doorstep.
No, not at all. What the government should be doing instead is addressing the massive backlog in cases of those who are made an application for refugee status, for asylum. Currently, that backlog stands at 122,000. By the way, in 2010, it was about 12,000. So if you address the backlog, people being housed in humane conditions, far less. But also, if you were to give support to local authorities, to other partners, we could make sure they were properly housed in appropriate accommodation. What you don't want is hundreds and hundreds of people who are all asylum seekers housed either in the same block, in the same hotel, or in the same barge. These barges were built for hotels. They were staying for one night or maybe 2 nights. They're not supposed to be offshore accommodation, but basically permanent. And I make this point, many of your listeners may not realise, often people who came here years and years and years ago applied for asylum status and are still waiting the conclusion of their application. Now, though, it's far, far more difficult to get a safe route to come to this country. So, everyone who comes, the government assumes, is somehow, from Albania or somehow involved in illegality. Where in fact, the reason why they're coming by the boat is because there are no safe routes to come from, whether it's Syria or Afghanistan or elsewhere.
Do you think it's deliberate? I was going to ask you to address the concerns of people who contend, and sometimes they do so publicly, that anybody coming here seeking asylum should be grateful for a bin lid or a tent, and how dare they expect anything more luxurious than a sort of glorified birdcage. But I'm thinking instead that the figure you just shared, the rise from 12,000 to 122,000, either it's an epic episode of incompetence, or it's actually a deliberate attempt to create precisely the crisis that they're now claiming they will solve by introducing these barges. Which do you think it is?
I think what the government needs to realise is if you're fleeing...
There's two choices there. Which do you think it is? Do you think it's epic incompetence or a deliberate attempt to create the crisis that they're now claiming that they can solve?
It's a combination of both.
Okay.
And let me tell you why I say that. Because the government's thesis is they'll make life so intolerable for you, you won't want to come here.
Yeah.
There's no evidence, by the way, that somebody fleeing persecution, somebody who's been tortured, somebody who may have links to this country nowhere else, will be deterred by that. I'll give you an example. If you were an interpreter for the British Army in Afghanistan, you were given the assurance that you'd be given a safe haven here if things turn sour in Afghanistan. We now know there are hundreds of interpreters who are currently languishing in parts of Pakistan, waiting to come to the UK because there is no safe route. So if the idea that somehow they'll be deterred from coming here when the alternative is to go to the Taliban in Afghanistan is nonsense. This is why it just doesn't work. And so look, I'm the opposite of a NIMBY. I love the fact that our cities, strengthens our diversity. I love the fact that successive generations of migrants will come here. Danny Finkelstein's written a fantastic book, that's out this week, talking about his family's journey to this country, after the Holocaust. And so, there are many people, in our country, from the founders of Marks and Spencer's to our most successful Olympian, whose, roots originally were as asylum seekers and refugees who've become Great Britain. So I've got no problems with, asylum seekers and refugees coming to London. The issue is, are we really saying in 2023 we're going to house them indefinitely on a barge?
Well, yes, we are, is the government's response to that. And they would say to you at this point, final question, if we don't house them on this barge, where do we house them?
What we do is we give sufficient funding to local authorities and partners to house them in suitable accommodation. We in London have started buying back some of the properties sold off under right to buy. You also speed up the asylum process so that rather than people languishing for 5, 10, 15 years, their claims are processed quicker. The other big issue is many of these people are doctors, scientists, experts who aren't allowed to work whilst their claims have been processed, often many, 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 many years. They want to work.
Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, many thanks. Hang on. Have you got any powers to stop it from happening, or is it just sort of cross your fingers and hope for the best?
So this part will be moored the Royal Docks. We are one of the board members of the Royal Docks Management Board, along with the University of East London, along with Newham Council, along with the Excel Centre. We'll be making our views quite clear, and we're hoping the Royal Docks say to the Home Office no, and all the Home Office could then do is to presumably change the law to force us to do so, but we've got the power to say no. And for people not familiar with this corner of the capital, it's practically on the runway at City London. Yeah, absolutely. So it's literally a stone's throw from the airport runway, but also there's no infrastructure here to support these individuals and families who may well have PTSD, serious trauma, may need help, and they'll be literally just turfed out of the way by the Royal Docks, living on a barge indefinitely. Well, we shall keep an eye on the story and no doubt hear more from you on it as well. Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, many thanks. 10:48 is the time. 10:51 is the time. It is, you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the question, it's a really weird one, isn't it? I think we got it right today. We don't get it right every day. Goodness me. Some of the conversations we had about the problems over at ITV with regard to Philip Schofield were like pulling teeth. But we got it right today because there is a sort of aligning of planets. Astonishing scenes in New York City of, it's just smoke billowing in to town from wildfires raging across Canada, about 150 uncontrolled wildfires in Canada, a consequence of everything getting hotter. So not a consequence of fossil fuels
the smoke isn't coming from the burning of fossil fuels. I suppose technically it is if you include wood as a fossil fuel, but not for industry or transport or infrastructure. But of course, the burning of the fossil fuels gets everything hotter, and when things get hotter, fires are more likely to happen and less likely to be controllable. So you've got that going on. You've got the story from earlier in the week that really is astonishing about Arctic ice, Arctic summer ice, and what one expert in the field has described as the first major component of the Earth system that we are actually going to lose as a consequence of global warming. This is Professor Dirk Notz at the University of Hamburg, part of the study team up in the Arctic. He says, as scientists, we've been warning about the loss of Arctic summer sea ice for decades. This is now the first major component of the Earth system that we're going to lose because of global warming. And then, inexorably, actually, that takes us to the announcement today by Caroline Lucas, the first Green Party MP in this country, and still the only Green Party MP in this country, that she is stepping down from her role, in part because she would like to focus more on the existential challenges that drive her, the nature and climate emergencies, the threats more urgent. She feels she can do better outside Parliament than in it, which is in many ways part of the problem that we're discussing. Why has the Green Party not been more successful, either electorally or politically? And what do you think they might do differently? 0345 6060 973. Bob's in Broxbourne. Bob, what would you like to say?
Yes, thanks, James.
Hello,
well,
Bob.
I would say that the Greens have done well electorally. In the recent local elections, I'm an insider because I'm a former councillor, and now for my sins, I'm a coordinator for the local party as I'm getting longer in the tooth.
Okay.
But the target was a number of gains to be 100 national, or in England and Wales. Scotland is autonomous, of course.
Yes.
The target was 100, and the actual number of gains was 241. Now, you don't expect a party to dramatically underestimate how much they're going to get, but I think we did. And in my local neck of the woods, we reduced the Tory majority over the Green Party in 2 years by nearly 1,000 votes, which I actually had to check the maths, James.
Have we been here before, though, Bob? Have there been false dawns before? Because I am drawing everything at the moment back to Caroline's election in Brighton in 2010, and that looking at that landscape, that 13-year-long vista, your cheerfulness is not quite as well placed as it is just looking at the last 3 months.
Well, the reason Caroline won was because there was a lot of work from the bottom up in her area. First of all, she was a very credible candidate. She was an MEP in the southeast region.
Yes.
Brighton and Hove is in the southeast. Then it was an obvious area for her to stand.
I understand the specifics of it, but if we look at the progress the party has made since 2010, albeit with these very gratifying results in the most recent local elections, surely we could agree with each other that we probably both thought they'd have gone a little bit further by now.
Yeah, I mean, there is potential there to really dramatically increase, provided we stick to the plan and do it from the bottom up. And I wanted to sort of finish off with the strategy which everybody knows about is think global, act local. I think it's Greenpeace's mantra. And, well, that's interesting because everybody wants to help with the problems that we have that you've talked about today with the smog and all the rest. But you can't vote globally. You can't vote for a global party and global government. And I think, from my point of view, thankfully not.
Yes,
but what you can do, you can act locally. You can get active in your community. You can do things in your trade union, in your little local community groups. And you can vote. And that's where we're starting. And what I find is that when people realise that the Greens are more than just about the environment, because several people have raised that this morning.
Yes, I know.
Then they're impressed and surprised. And I made the point to your researcher. We're the only party which really thinks holistically about the way things work.
But we're back in the same problem again then. So why aren't more people aware of that?
Well, they become aware of it when we get active locally.
Yeah, no, I know. So you're not active enough locally would be the answer to the question. There's a lot there. Can I ask you a slightly strange question that's based entirely upon anecdotal evidence, as in the co-chair of the party up in the Wirral and yourself? You've described yourself as long in the tooth. She described herself as having been in the Labour Party for 35 years. So I'm going to speculate that you're both from the older generation. Is the young blood coming through, or are they all heading off down more activist paths and more radical paths like Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil?
Well, the local person that we had as our main candidate here locally, she's 60-something.
Yes.
And I'm 69.
Yes.
But the chap that we've got lined up for the general election here in Broxbourne to try to replace Charles Walker, Sir Charles Walker, is 24 years old.
Okay, so that does not really an answer to... You are doing your best, but in terms of meetings and new members and people coming through the movement, is it getting younger or older, Bob?
It's about the same. There are some younger ones, but you're right, the average is slightly higher.
See, that's another thing. That's another thing that defies the stereotypes, isn't it? It's everyone thinks it's young crusties, but it's really not. It's deeply engaged, experienced, mature people like yourself, and ideally young people coming up as well. Although I do wonder about the possibility or risk of them being more attracted to the more high-profile activities with the specific pressure groups, and that adds to the problem of people not being aware of the full package that the Green Party offers. Quite a few of you pointing out a little error, a deliberate error on my part, just to make sure that you were paying attention. I'll let Alan in Cambridge take up the seat in Pedant's Corner. Wood is not a fossil fuel. It is, of course, a store of carbon, but it's not a fossil fuel. It becomes a fossil fuel, doesn't it, when it is compressed over millions of years into coal and things. 10:59 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I thought that was fascinating, and we need to return to it. It's going to be like AI, oddly, because they're probably the two greatest threats that the species faces. AI and environmental damage. And yet, because of that horizon issue, because of the fact of the horizon, as opposed to it being something that you can really feel the pinch of now in your daily life, it's a challenge for me to know how and when to do it on the programme, but I promise to do both more than I currently do. Up next, bosses and teachers warning that we're not teaching our children the right thing.
On your radio.
It's 3 minutes after 11. It's mad that. They're just listening to the news bulletin and being struck again by the sort of juxtaposition of stories. Caroline Lucas standing down after 13 years in Parliament because she doesn't feel that is the place to most effectively communicate the climate crisis, the threat, the existential threat caused by, for example, global warming. And then in the very next story, Lottie's very next story in the same news bulletin on the same day, the situation in New York, the wildfires causing absolute mayhem in New York City. And I guess some people still perhaps will persist in pretending that there is no link between the two issues. Okay, two stories now. I've forgotten the name. It's terrible that. I should have jotted it down. We were talking about schools the other day, and a teacher rang in. She'd given up teaching, actually, very, very reluctantly. And sometimes I'm surprised by the response to callers on the programme. I've been doing this job now for so long. I sometimes fall into the trap of thinking that I've heard it all before. It was one of those calls where I thought, yeah, it's everyone, I've heard that before. But the response, of course, partly because there's so many more people listening than there were a couple of years ago or 10 years ago. There's loads more people listening. So just because I might have heard it all before doesn't mean you have. But the nature of teaching in our schools these days being so prescriptive, being such an exercise in box ticking, there being no room for humanity, if you like. It's a sort of almost a robotic scenario, resonated with so many of you. I mean, it surprised us all. The inbox just started fizzing with people saying, oh, thank God, finally someone said it. And it stayed with me. And it was still in the back of my mind this morning when I read two stories. One comes from the Times Education Commission, which has done some great work. And the other comes from a survey of employers for the Recruitment and Employment Confederation. And in a way, they're very similar stories. 2/3 of the public believe the education system is failing to teach pupils the right skills. So hold that thought. That's going to be the first question. What are the right skills? 0344. What are our children not being taught that they should be taught? 0345 6060 It's a very, very widely held position among Britons, the majority of whom, it's a poll by YouGov, think that pupils are ill prepared for their futures and that a lack of workplace skills is holding back Britain. And separate research, separate polling by PricewaterhouseCoopers has found that 85% of employers were experiencing or expected to experience skills shortages. And a separate piece of research undertaken by the Recruitment and Employment Confederation has said that employers were having to train young staff in work etiquette that students usually learnt in face-to-face tutorials. So there's two things. There's schools and universities. The full sort of secondary and tertiary education spectrum is, we are told, not equipping pupils with what they need when they get to the workplace. And I'm going to focus on that. Now, back in the day, I'm doing this quite often at the moment. I'm saying what I used to do with similar subjects back in the day and how we've changed now. On this one, I don't need to self-flagellate or beat myself up for previous misdemeanours because I didn't realise. It wasn't a conscious decision. There's always a temptation when you're older to hark back to the good old days or to think that things were either much harder when you were young than they are for the youngsters today have got it so easy, or to think that something has changed, something profound has changed since you were young. It's important to resist that temptation. And it's also important to remember who the problem is happening to, right? So if children are not being taught the skills they need, and if graduates are struggling to find work because lockdown prevented them from making wide circles of friends or learning how to behave in meetings, they are the victims of this story, of these stories. There's 2 or 3 separate stories here. The young people here are the victims of unfair circumstances. So for me to come on the radio, as I fear I may once have done, and talked about the obvious importance of a firm handshake and making eye contact in work-seeking environments, is not helpful. It is not the fault of the young people that they are turning up for job interviews or leaving school or leaving university. It is not the fault of the young people that they lack the skills we would all prefer them to have. So, how do we handle this one? Because I took a call, she's going back a long time, from an absolutely distraught young lady who heard me do a similar story from a few years ago, heard me do a treatment of it that essentially portrayed her and her peers as being responsible for their own misfortunes. And she was absolutely devastated by that. It was one of those moments where I really got a sharp and quite violent reminder that my burblings at work on the radio in this weird hermetically sealed room with Keith eating a sandwich on the other side of the glass. These burblings arrive in your life as real, as part of your real life. So you forget sometimes, and it's when you forget that you're sometimes tempted into territory that's not very kind or not very pleasant. I don't think we arrive in that territory much anymore, but we used to. Obesity, as we touched on yesterday, used to be an area in which we did that. So did corporal punishment, bizarrely. But on this one, I think I used to very lazily fall into the position of thinking, well, you've just got to pull your socks up and try hard. Oh, what do you mean, young people? How hard can it be? When the answer is simple. I mean, for a start, I had a stupidly privileged education. I had an absurdly privileged education, which involved money being spent on providing me with precisely the sort of lessons that we're reading now. Massive majority of young people simply do not get. So the arrogance and entitlement involved in me sitting here and saying, how hard can it be to learn interview skills or to know that when you arrive at a job interview, you shouldn't be looking at the floor or giving an insipid handshake or failing to make eye contact. The arrogance and entitlement involved in that. There's a reason why people like me and my parents spend money on private education. It's so that our children get taught things that are not obviously and immediately taught in other contexts and other circumstances. So park immediately the thought that any of this is the fault of the young people, albeit that some commentators may find it hard to resist the temptation to use it as an opportunity to attack the young, the same commentators who think that they would all be able to afford homes if they only stopped eating so much avocado. or having so many Netflix subscriptions. That kind of really lazy demonisation of young people didn't used to bother me at all, but now it really boils my blood. Okay. But what is going wrong remains an important and pertinent question. What is going wrong, albeit that the responsibility, the fault does not lie with the young people. It lies with us. It lies with the oldies. It lies with the people who should be passing on important messages and important lessons to the young people. So teachers, I guess, employers and parents are going to be some of the most obvious ports of call on this one, but also young people. Also you, perhaps fearing that this is about you. You are a graduate who is struggling to find work because you haven't got a wide circle of friends or learned how to behave in meetings because of the privations of lockdown. Employers report that if you were forced to complete your courses online or in small groups, then you are less work savvy. Now, I just want to know whether you buy that, okay? 0345 6060 973 from both sides of the job interview desk. So you're looking to hire young people. Have you noticed a diminishment in what they call work savviness? Okay? 0345 6060 973. Are you a young-ish graduate who has struggled or is struggling to find work? And do you feel that you are suffering from the unfair experiences of the last few years? But I also want examples of what we're talking about. So I want examples of what's missing from real life, if you like. You know, someone turning up for or starting work. And I don't... Again, I'm afraid, and this might not delight everybody, my sympathy also extends to some of the stuff that is very easily demonised. So my sympathy also extends to people turning up for work and having much higher expectations of how they would be treated than we had when we were young. Because that is one of the only ways that you can guard against exploitation and abuse in the workplace is by empowering young people. But I can see what tensions it might cause if someone turns up for work and starts laying down the law on how many tea breaks they're going to take when you think they should be grateful for the opportunity in the first place. I see that. I see a big generational difference between myself and colleagues, for example, in their 20s and 30s. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but it's a change that needs to be absorbed and accommodated, isn't it? So the other element of this is, what aren't we teaching them? Because it has to be a teachable skill. Right? A teachable skill. So and I hope this works, if I am to tie together these two stories, one looking at graduates, one looking at schools, if I am to tie them together and say there is a skill set missing or a skill set in retreat, right? What does that look like is question one. What have you encountered that enforces, supports or challenges the idea that the younger generation is arriving in the job-seeking place, in the jobs market, lacking some crucial components, okay? 0345 6060 973. And then question number two is the other end of the same telescope in many ways. What are the skills that could be taught? This is where my privilege kicks in, because I've got a strong suspicion that stuff I didn't even think I'd been taught at school, I was taught. Like a debating society, for example, or a careers meeting, or staged interviews. All of that, you don't realise you're learning. But if there are schools up and down the country in which none of that happens, then the pupils who are experiencing it are learning things, useful things, teachable skills that enhance their employability. And it's not there. So, two questions. What have you seen that supports or challenges the idea that young people, particularly graduates now, are less, quotes, work savvy, end quotes, than previous generations? And similar but not the same, what are these skills? What needs to be taught? How hard is it to teach it? I always remember, I think in retrospect, I may have made a bit of a Herbert of myself, but I remember a journalist, an author, bringing in some young gang members that she'd worked with. They'd come out of care. Their experiences were shocking to me. Just being alone, for example, at 16, leaving social care and being stuck in a flat where there were no cooking facilities. So you sit here pompously wondering why people are living on chips. And the answer is that's A, all they can afford, and B, all they can access, because they have no cooking facilities in the accommodation that the council has put them in. And I wanted to help, and I tried to help, and I did help a bit. But the stuff I thought mattered must have sounded so stupid to them. Talking about the sort of stuff that, I was taught in preparation for university interviews. and thinking that the same skills may be relevant. Well, maybe they are. That's why I'm asking you. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. It's 11:15. It is 11:17 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we are sympathising with young people and apologising, as old gits, for not giving them the skills that they need to thrive in the jobs market. We're looking at two or three separate pieces of research and report. One suggesting that graduates are struggling to find work because the nature of lockdown prevented them from making wide circles of friends or learning how to behave in meetings. That comes from the recruitment end of the market, the claim that they are less work savvy than previous generations. Meanwhile, the Times Education Commission has found that 2/3 of the public believe the entire education system is failing to teach pupils the right skills. And by the right skills, they mean, in part, the skills they need to get ahead at work, workplace skills. I'm just double checking during the break there that these were actually different stories. I'm 90% that they are. They appear in the same newspaper on different pages, so you have to presume that they're different stories. But I don't know whether the news editor was on lunch or something, but they seem to be speaking to almost exactly the same phenomenon. And so shall we. Starting with Gillian, who's in Galloway. Gillian, what would you like to say?
Hi there.
Hello.
Just to say, I'm a mum of two boys. One's just finished university. My other son is very academic. There isn't a provision in schools for kids that are not so academic.
It's not a great phone line, Gillian. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that. I'm not picking up everything that you're saying. We'll crack on, but be warned that we may.
Oh, right.
All right.
Okay.
So the one that went to university is not the one that you just described as very academic.
He's good, but he was orientated. And we had to kind of find a really good degree for him, which he got, which was brilliant.
Got it.
But for the kids that want to be joiners or electricians or mechanics, skills seem to sort of push them.
But we never taught those skills at school, though, did we? Well, not for generations. We did carpentry, I suppose, back in the day, but I don't think we ever did plumbing at school.
No, yeah. Our school that my youngest son's at, they went out and they spoke to joiner electricians and plumbers, and on a voluntary basis, they got these guys into the school. So they have given them an opportunity.
That's a really good idea. It's a bit off the topic that we're actually discussing, isn't it? Because, I mean, by workplace skills, they don't mean the ability to fit a boiler or build a bench. They're talking more about the work savviness, like knowing how to behave when you get into the workplace.
But you see, my other side is that I'm a recruiter.
Yes.
So I do graduate recruitment.
Okay.
And you get a lot of kids coming out of university with thinking that they're entitled because they've got a degree to get £35,000 a year.
Straight away.
And you think, you've got to pay your dues. And I think a lot of university kids have been given that experience within university, so they don't have any practical experience. Some universities certainly do offer practical experience, which is great.
Yes.
But when you get flooded with CVs of students where all they've done is a degree, they've no practical experience, but yet they have this view that because they've got that degree, they can get £40,000 a year.
Yeah.
So it can be, you have to sit them down very gently.
I'm sure you do. Again, though, it's not new, this, is it? I don't think.
No.
What jumps out for you from a CV? When you say practical experience, what sort of sectors are you recruiting in?
I recruit in IT and information technology.
Okay.
So it's people going away during their summer holidays, going and voluntarily worked somewhere, or
in IT.
job.
You want someone? Okay. Well, that's in some ways the most illuminating thing, because you'd have thought that was obvious, but it's not obvious to them, and that's where it's our fault. There shouldn't be anybody really studying IT at university who isn't having it drummed into them at every turn that they should do their best to get workplace experience while still at university before applying for jobs upon graduation. But it sounds to me as if they're not being taught that at university.
My son, 2 years, he didn't set foot on campus.
No, we're doing it all practical and workplace based. But again, that means his university is doing it right. I'm feeling for the young IT graduates who no one has. And this is where old me would have gone, well, do they really need to be told? Do they need to be told? But clearly you do. Someone should say, no, it doesn't matter if you get a first. the candidate there with a good 2-1 who's spent every summer holiday since school working in the sector that you're trying to get a job in, that candidate's probably going to move faster up the CV pile of someone like Gillian than you are. But I completely understand why you've worked so hard to get that first. It's just that might be part of the problem here. And no blame apportioned, really, except to the institutions taking tons of money off these young people. Morna's in Dartford. Morna, what would you like to say?
Well, I was going to say, I am a mature student. I've just finished my degree. I'm graduating this summer. But something I've noticed with my classmates, particularly the ones who are coming straight out of college and having just finished their A-levels, is that especially in the first year, they were lacking in confidence.
Yeah.
They didn't know how to express themselves in a group. They didn't even know how to speak loud enough that the entire class could hear them.
Oh gosh. No, that, do you know, as you said that it just made so much sense to me for some reason. Because why would you know? How would you know that everything you've done in that context online is different from offline, isn't it? When you get into the classroom, you can mumble into your microphone if you're doing your schooling via Zoom. Gosh.
It's an entirely different beast.
Yes.
And while the younger people do have the advantage of, technology is everywhere. They have grown up with computers and phones and all of this. I'm actually finding that they're not necessarily as tech savvy as you'd think they are.
Really?
Because they're used to apps.
Yes.
You go onto your phone, you open an app and you do the thing. They couldn't go onto a PC and find some file without help because they have never had to do that.
Well, I never. That's astonishing, isn't it? What would you be teaching? How do you teach confidence, do you think, in the context? And we are talking about the cohort that probably got more privations during lockdown than any other, aren't we? I think.
Well, in my first year, we were basically entirely online, and it wasn't until the second year when we started being able to go back onto campus again.
And that's when you saw these things. How do we teach them?
Yeah.
How do we help them?
It's the sort of they need practice. The one thing I did notice with them that as they were going on through the years, they did become more confident because they had to give presentations to the class. They had to work in groups for assignments. But it is still that thing of, surely they should know this when they're coming out of high school.
Yes. Yes, but if no one's telling them, it might seem obvious,
exactly.
But if no one's telling them, it's not their fault, is it?
No, exactly. And it's something that, I have opinions on our education system, but that's a whole other thing.
Well, it isn't. It isn't. Yes. It is this prescriptive box-ticking exercise. So, thank you, Morna. The sympathy you have for these people. That's the best example so far. Just being in a scenario where you need to be heard and actually not understanding what that means. Not raising your voice to a sufficient volume through a combination of inexperience and probably anxiety. You don't raise your voice to a sufficient volume to be heard. Now, that's in a classroom, but you transfer that experience into a job interview situation or even a work situation, and that young person is absolutely banjaxed, completely compromised. And the confidence stroke. There's a thin line between confidence and cockiness. And this is an area in which I am probably qualified to comment. You need to help the unconfident child develop, or young person develop confidence. Listen, you can pick holes in what callers say. That's absolutely fine. So Simon wants to pick a hole in what Gillian said. How on earth do you volunteer as an IT professional? There's no way. You can't just walk into an office and say, I'll look after your computers for you. That's not how it works. And these poor kids don't have the opportunity to volunteer because they're busy working part-time jobs to pay for the degree that they're trying to get because they don't have support from their parents who don't have the money. That's a superb text, Simon. It really is like a tesseract folding together. You make excellent points. Anthony suggests that these are two different stories, the workplace skills or the soft skills, and then the schools not teaching computers or critical thinking or creative skills enough. All of this are essential in the modern world. Not quite. I did read back down into it again. And we're both right. Both stories look towards soft skills, what you might call workplace savviness. But the second one, the one about 2/3 of us fearing that schools aren't teaching the right skills does extend into what you'd call more measurable skills as well, more specific skills, such as those involved with green technology, core competencies in reading, maths and communication. But it's only a couple of weeks ago since we saw some very gratifying figures about where the UK sits now on the international sort of charts of reading skills and abilities. James is in Bermondsey. James, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. Nice to speak to you.
Likewise.
Yeah, I'm an employer, and I've had some, both positive and negative experiences, actually, of trying to employ young people and graduates, and non-graduates, just young people. The main problem that we've had is, for a start, actually getting people to turn up to the interview. So they'll agree to come, and then we'll go to the office, expecting them at 9 o'clock. Nothing, 9:20, they're not there. You're chasing them, and at 10 o'clock, oh, yeah, I was going to call you to tell you that I couldn't come. So that's the first problem.
I just, again, I stress this is your absolute actual experience, and it's in no way an attempt to portray every young person listening or every young person whose parents are listening as being like this, but it's a real and present problem for you as an employer. I hear it quite a lot, actually. It's weird. How do you make sense of it?
I don't understand it, and it's not just once or twice. I mean, I'm 47. Yes. When I was that age and going to job interviews, you'd make sure you were there early. You had your CV, you were dressed smartly, you had your questions in your mind that you were going to ask at the end of the interview, and you were nervous. Now, I think there's a bit more of a cockiness in the ones that do turn up. Almost, it's a seller's market. But I should also mention that we do have graduates working for us who have been absolutely excellent.
Yes. What's the difference? What's the difference?
Well, the ones that have worked out have basically. Sorry, I'll just go back a bit. So we're a fine art. So we're a fine art transportation company.
Oh, cool.
So these are office jobs, the ones that I'm talking about, and there's a lot of. Well, it's all on-the-job training. You come in, and we know that. We don't expect these people to know anything about the job at all. We just hope that they can use a computer, know how to answer emails, and speak civilly to people on the phone, and then we'll teach them everything else.
Right.
One of the main problems that I've noticed is that there's a real lack of basic maths. So you're asking people to work out, okay, look, this is how we work out a quote to get something from A to B. You take this, you add this, you minus this, and then you add a bit of a percentage. We've had people working for us on trial periods who literally had no idea how to work out a percentage of something. And it actually came down to conversations where I said, well, okay, let's take it simply then. What's 10% of 100? And they don't know the answer. And you think, right, okay, this is going to be hard.
Yeah.
And there's also the problem that they don't seem to realise that it's going to take them a long time to learn this. So we're patient. We think, okay, you might not be any use to us at all for 6 months.
Sure.
But that means that you're going to have to come in, sit in the office, and you might not do anything for a few days. You'll literally just be sitting there, listening to what's going on, seeing the conversations that people are having on the phone, etc. And then after a while, you'll start getting copied in on emails. I mean, we had one guy, after the first week, he hadn't answered a single email or opened an email, and the transport manager said to him, why have you got 187 unread emails in your inbox? And he had a little notepad and he wrote on there, must read emails.
Oh, bless him.
So
this is difficult, isn't it?
Everyone.
Because this is perfect. This is exactly, I must have done something right in the introduction. This is exactly the call I was looking for, because I feel sorry for that lad. And yet at the same time, I'd like to grab him by the ears and give his head a wobble. So, I mean, what's it like for you as an employer?
Well, obviously it's very frustrating, because every time this happens, we don't just pick people up off the street and say, oh, do you want a job? And then they're there the next day. They'll be there coming for their first day after at least one, sometimes maybe 2 or even 3 interviews.
Yeah.
And also another thing that happens is...
Go on, I can't wait for it. You're on a roll. Don't spoil it. You're going for a hat trick now.
They'll promise the world. I mean, I had a guy who actually claimed that he had previous experience in what we do, and I thought, great. Yeah. Asked him some questions, and it all looked really good.
Right.
When I spoke to him over the phone. when he came in, I just wanted to go over with it, these details with him again, and said, okay, so you know how to do this, do you? Yeah. Okay. So in this, excuse the industry jargon, but on this import, then what procedure code would you apply to this customs clearance?
Yeah.
That's a difficult one, isn't it? No, it's not a difficult one. It's the most easiest question I could have asked you.
If you told me the truth about your previous experience.
Well, the trouble is that you think, well, you haven't told me the truth about that. Can I believe anything that's on your CV?
And yet that's confidence. Oddly, blagging and confidence, there's a perforated line between the two. So that's an opposite problem from some of the ones that have been described by other contributors and indeed other. And this research, James, it's a compliment to how engrossed I was by your stories that I completely lost track of the time. I'm very late for this, and I apologise to Lottie Morley. It's 11:36. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Honestly, the stories I could tell you about the stuff that goes on when the microphone is not live. You'd have to wait for my memoirs. Henry Riley's just moosied into the studio. To what do we owe this pleasure?
Well, an update from your conversation from Sadiq Khan. He, of course, referenced to you, this is the proposal for the barge containing people, asylum seekers, people who weren't born in this country, whilst they await processing to live on that particular barge in the Royal Docks in East London. I spent the morning there. I was chatting to people out and about, seeing what they made of it. Some testy exchanges, actually, James, between members of the public disagreeing on the issue. And Sadiq Khan told you, essentially, the Home Office were approached by the Royal Docks, the Royal Docks were approached by the Home Office in order to make this, a proposal. I've just found out, James, that is not going ahead now. The proposal dead, essentially. It cannot happen. The Royal Docks Management Authority, which Sadiq Khan is a board member, he referenced to you in the conversation, didn't he? When you said, is this sort of all words or is there any practical thing you can do? He said he hoped the Royal Docks Management Authority would turn around to the Home Office and say no. And that is exactly what they have done, James. They say,
just in the last 10 minutes?
Well, it's only been reported now, but we understand they were told this in May. So the Home Office actually not very happy. They say after investigation, this is the Docks Management Authority, after investigation, it was concluded this would not be an appropriate use for the Royal Docks. The Home Office have been informed of this decision in May. So the Home Office here, and it's important to say, James, I was speaking with a source at the Home Office earlier who was furious that this had got out. They were saying that Sadiq Khan is causing trouble. He knows this is unlikely to go ahead, virtually impossible. In fact, they would have known at the time, James, the Home Office, that this couldn't go ahead. They say the Mayor is playing politics, and they weren't particularly happy that he's come out today and opposed the plans so sort of fiercely.
The Metropolitan Police also understood to have concluded that the plans would constitute a safety threat to those on the barge. So the Home Office are, embarrassed, really, as well as furious.
Yeah, well, quite. And that line from the Metropolitan Police, interestingly, they refused to comment when I did try and speak with them earlier. But one senior officer told me that it would be a disaster, essentially. Indeed, not just the fact that it's in London, but the idea of having a group of migrants on a barge when, of course, they are already a target, as we know, James, for various crimes. Yeah. Having them all sort of together was a disaster waiting to happen, as they told me.
So, I know you're probably not across all of it, but there were 4 locations identified by Suella Braverman. No one's disputing that the Royal Docks in East London were one of the 4 potential locations. Nobody really, because the MP for South Dorset doesn't want one in his constituency either, does he? Richard Drax. So there's a variety of objections. Some are objecting on humanitarian grounds and saying this is it doesn't matter where it is, I object entirely to this, whereas some are objecting on slightly more NIMBY-ish grounds.
Yes, so Richard Drax, for example, who you referenced, that would be Portland in Dorset. Yes. He described it actually to me as a quasi-prison. He said he didn't want it to go ahead. He was actually worried from a different point of view, James. He was saying to me he was worried about people going into Weymouth, not having much money to spend, and the implications that could have. He wasn't sure if they would be let off that so-called quasi-prison. But that one, interestingly, James, that is going ahead. So within a fortnight, that will be operational. He sort of is on a bit of a losing battle with that one, right? Richard Drax. There are 2 more confirmed, which Rishi Sunak said would go ahead. We understand they will be in Liverpool and the other one near Middlesbrough. And then separate to that, James, there are 4 more locations the Home Office were looking at, including Newcastle, Felixstowe, and of course the Royal Docks today. So these were, and Harwich, of course, and these were less sort of further down the agenda, but nonetheless the Home Office looking at these sites. But I imagine quite embarrassed that it's been leaked out that they weren't allowed to do so.
Yes, I shall ask the Mayor about it next time he's in the studio. But suspicion of a little bit of sharp practice here? Because it now looks like he's won a battle, doesn't it, against the Home Office to keep the barge out of the docks, where they definitely wanted to put it, but possibly already knew that they wouldn't be able to. That's the story. It was the Telegraph where I saw it this morning, not traditionally an organ that you'd expect to help Sadiq Khan and undermine Suella Braverman.
Well, what's interesting, James, he's played a rather good game on this, Sadiq Khan, because what he's done is the Conservatives in London have been sort of tearing themselves to pieces over this morning. There are 9 candidates running to be Mayor of London from the Conservative side to take on Sadiq Khan. 8 of them are public. One of them doesn't actually want to go public yet, but that's another story entirely.
You know who it is, do you?
I know who it is.
Okay.
I can tell you in the break.
I look forward to it.
I've
never heard of any of them, so it doesn't make any difference really, but hey-ho. Bills, have I heard of this one?
No.
That's the way you tell him, Henry.
I'd suggest. But we were talking about the Conservative candidates. Yes. Susan Hall came out this morning and said, I'm fully in favour of the Home Office. It should be at the Royal Docks, this migrant barge. If it's safe enough to happen, then I'm not a NIMBY. Andrew Boff, who's another one of those candidates, also in the London Assembly, told LBC it was a terrible idea, it shouldn't happen. And you've had all sorts of 9 candidates running around this morning trying to get their own separate line out. Meanwhile, Sadiq Khan, I imagine he probably knew the decision in advance.
We'll find out. I shall accuse him of that, certainly, next time I see him. So he's just been sitting there watching his potential opponents bite chunks out of each other all morning.
That's correct.
Henry Riley, many thanks indeed. 11:42 is the time. Back to the experiences of employers, in particular, with young people. And I thought that James's, the fine art transporter, that was a remarkable insight, and one that has resonated with a lot of you. A well-meaning young person sitting in an office for a week and then not opening any emails. Because no one's ever taught them. And I know what you're thinking, and I think it too, but I fight against the thought that, do you really need to be taught to open it? But yeah, you probably do. And then of course, what you do if you're a bit arrogant, and I can occasionally fall foul of that particular attribute, you think back to what you were like when you were in the workplace, and you think, well, I just watched everybody else and I copied them and I pretended to be confident until I did actually become a bit confident, and how hard can it really be? And the answer is actually very hard. It's nothing worse than people who've done all right thinking that it was easy to do all right, and therefore everybody else should be able to copy it. Everybody needs help. Help is good. Advice is good. Expertise is good. The absence of it creates these ludicrous situations in which this lad doesn't even think to open his emails. Oof. Let's go to Wayne in Kingsbridge, who I happen to know is the owner of a pizza delivery company, pizza company, and we spoke quite a lot during lockdown. How are you getting on, Wayne?
I'm still doing it.
Still hanging in there.
Still doing it. Surviving.
Good.
Just about. So yeah, it's all good. But most of my job now, if someone was to ask me what I do, I now teach young people how to sweep floors and wash dishes.
Which they need teaching.
Which they need teaching, because you've got dishwashers at home, and who else does the cleaning at home? Yeah. But yeah, so this is one of my soapbox topics. I'm arm's length involved in education still. I was a governor of a primary school pre-COVID, after I'd finished as a town councillor. But I'm now a trustee for a charity that gives money to the school that was left in wills and such like. So we manage an investment fund, and then we give money. So I've kind of got some sort of insight into what's going on in education.
Definitely.
But we find, and we've been seeing for a number of years, and it's been getting worse, the quality of applicants. And it's not their fault. No. It's just that they can't put what they learn in school into practice, into a workplace. And since COVID, everything that the previous guy, I think it was James, wasn't it? Everything that he said completely resonates. They just don't.
What do they? This is where it gets hard, doesn't it, to stay generous? Because the sort of questions are framing themselves in my mind. Like, what do they think a job involves? But that already sounds a bit critical. And just to clarify, I know you're not suggesting that they should, but no one gets taught to wash dishes or sweep floors at school. So what sort of skills leave you reeling at the absence of, if you see what I mean? So someone turns up and they're nice and they mean well and they want to get on, but then you discover that they don't realise that they should be able to or have to do X, Y, or Z. What are the X, Ys, and Zs that we're talking about here?
It's across the board, and I was taught how to sweep at school.
Were you?
Doing woodwork. I finished my GCSEs in 2005. For the first 3 years of my secondary school life, we had DT, design and technology, and that did include cooking as well. So we washed dishes up in cooking, we swept the floors after we managed to get wood sawdust everywhere. So, you learn those. I learned those skills in school as well as at home, but then also
all right.
in the workplace.
Okay, I stand corrected on that, up to a point, Lord Copper.
So little bits of experience, but right now it's non-existent, and this has been something that's been happening for years. You'll find the odd person will know how to do it, but it's that communication skills are non-existent.
So what does that mean? Being able to conduct a conversation or eye contact, or
just literally be able to talk? I mean, I've got a member of staff who's fairly new, and when he speaks, you can barely hear him, and that resonated with the previous caller who said, in Zoom that you couldn't hear. Now, if you're in a pizza takeaway with 2 gas-fired ovens firing up and an extraction system, if you're not projecting your voice properly, you will not be heard.
How do you have that conversation, Wayne? How do you do that? How do you
at
tell
the start of every shift, so far I've been right. Today is the day we're going to hear your voice.
Right.
Let's practice.
Okay.
Let's practice. Come on, louder. Go.
Yeah.
Copy me. And hopefully, eventually, it'll click. And I don't need him to shout when he's talking to everybody else. I just need when he's shouting across the building.
Yes, of course. It has to be heard. Otherwise, someone's going to get the wrong pizza. And it's really that simple, isn't it? And you have to do it in a way that is encouraging rather than bullying. And that the more frustrated you are, the more difficult that gets, I imagine.
Incredibly hard. Over the years, it's been really hard to get it. But yesterday I had breakfast with a former member of staff who's moved back to the area after finishing her Masters. Yes. And she shared the fact that she's got skills that she learned when working for me that she has moved into every part of her life in the 3 years since.
That's lovely,
so,
isn't it?
It's great to hear that sort of stuff. And I will always forever shout about going and working as you do, as I've done previously when speaking to you. Go and work in hospitality, even if it's just for a few months. Learn it, have a see of how it works, because it makes a difference.
And it gives you, it does give you skills that are deeply transferable. How worried are you now? I mean, because you've been in business for a while. Is it the worst it's ever been?
The worst it's ever been. Yeah. Last Friday was my 14th anniversary of buying the business. I was 19. Thanks. I was 19 when I bought it. I persuaded my parents to remortgage the family home, bought the business off of my boss, and haven't looked back.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Since. So, when kids don't listen to me, I get quite frustrated
because you know of what you
speak. The age that I was when I did this, and I'm a bit cocky because I did music at GCSE and A levels, so it gave me a little bit of the performance side of stuff.
Okay.
And I was a cocky youngster, but that has taught me everything that I've needed to know to be able to do what I do, the way that I do it, and learn from me. Because if you want to go off and be an accountant, I'll give you things that you can learn with that. If you want to go off and be an engineer and work on the biggest sewer in London, I will work with you on that as well. We've got former members of staff who go out and film music videos with massive international stars.
Amazing.
We've got former members of staff who is a lead engineer for one of the big engineering companies in the UK.
This is really important. Yeah, no, I know, I get it. You made me late for the break, but
sorry.
No, don't apologise. It's my fault. I'm in charge. Pizza Planet, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Pizza Planet in Kingsbridge. I open at 5, I think, today. Are you?
Someone's been Googling again.
Never miss it. 11:49 is the time. That's a skill. I mean, genuinely, that's a skill. So this conversation, using that, I remembered it was called Pizza Planet. I thought it'd be quite funny to drop in what time they open this afternoon and just do it while I'm talking. It's not a particularly big skill, but if you've got people starting jobs who don't know to check their own emails, then I'm afraid it does these days get filed under skill. It's a funny one, isn't it? 11:49 now. It's 11:53. Mystery Hour is on the way. We might do something tomorrow. I'll give you a little heads up about it, about the North-South divide. They think that they can locate the precise location of England's North-South divide by plotting Pret-a-Manger's and Greggs the Bakers on a map. And the point at which Pret-a-Manger's begin to outnumber Greggs the Bakers is the point at which the South begins. It's particularly helpful because it means that the Midlands, traditionally a bit of a grey area, my old manor, Birmingham, Coventry, Leicester, they should all be considered northern. I'd probably agree with that, actually. But I love the North-South divide. I love conversations about class and socioeconomic change and all that sort of thing. So there's a quick heads up. That's the kind of thing that I'm increasingly drawn to discussing at 12 o'clock on Fridays as we prepare to wind down for the week. Before that, though, we've got to go through Thursday. Mystery Hour up in 5 minutes. A couple more calls on this question of skills, work savviness, workplace skills, and the very sad lack of them. An awful lot of love coming in for Wayne, and particularly his suggestion that working in hospitality is invaluable when it comes to developing skills that you would be able to deploy in all manner of later employments. Let's go to Derby next. Louise is there. Louise, what would you like to say?
Hello. Yes, definitely more Greggs than Pretts in Derby.
Yeah, you would be bang on the middle of it, actually.
Yeah.
What made you pick up the phone?
I'm another of those statistics who could have called in the other day when you were talking about teachers who are leaving the profession. So I was a secondary school English teacher for about 10 years, and I finished 2 years ago. And actually, it was just after COVID and remote teaching, and that's what kind of prompted me to call today about the communication skills thing again, particularly with email. And I appreciate that not every job involves emailing customers directly, but even in terms of liaising with your employer themselves via email, we were finding that because we were suddenly speaking to students by email much more regularly than ever before because we were remote teaching. We'd get an email from a student where the entire message of their email would be in the subject line, where it would be...
Oh, really? They just didn't know what they were doing?
No, Miss, what's the work for today? Because I tried to download it and I can't open the file, and the entire message would be in the subject line. Right. Or you'd get an email with no subject line that would just say, where is the work? And we started trying to kind of show best practice by... Because
they communicate with each other via WhatsApp.
Yeah, it's almost as though they thought it was like just shooting your teacher a quick text message. Sort of thing. So we would reply and be like, good morning, Daniel, how nice to hear from you. Actually, if you would like to just do this, then this is where you will find the work. Have a lovely day.
Gosh.
And kind of modelling the best practice, because obviously not every student, but the vast majority, they were the kind of messages that we were receiving from students every day. And it does link back to what callers were saying the other day about just the restrictiveness of the curriculum, the fact that it's not really set up for modern day life. It's all just teaching to the test, and there is no scope to kind of go off curriculum enough and say, this would be a useful thing for you to learn.
Yeah, of course.
But if writing an email about this,
it should be obvious, shouldn't it? Or even do once by the time you're getting into GCSE year or lower six, be doing once a week on job application skills, how to apply for jobs, or how to. And
absolutely,
it would all file under it, wouldn't it? You
the school I worked at had an amazing careers department, and that is something they did very well. To be fair, they did lots of work on applying to college and writing job applications, but that. I don't think the students necessarily make the link between that and then how to behave in an actual day-to-day job after having applied.
It's sad, isn't it? And that's the point. I mean, these will be representative, but not wholly representative. There'll be plenty of young people who have got all of the skills that we would probably once have considered to be prerequisites. There's a privilege problem here as well, I think, Louise, isn't there?
Definitely.
I mean, the kind of stuff you get taught at schools like mine is taught by osmosis. You don't even formally sit down and do it. But the email thing, this is interesting from Karen, because there's some uncharitable responses to the lad who didn't know to open his emails, or indeed to your description of people who don't know how to operate their emails, even if they get over the hurdle of opening them. Karen tweeted me to say, when I started as a junior reporter in the early 80s, we didn't have a phone at home. I had never answered one. We were poor.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a clue how to deal with a phone call. It's not new. And she kindly says, I've got huge sympathy for the email kid. If they've never done it before, they don't know what they're doing, as you've proved.
Well, we spent the first 2 months of the lockdown trying to ensure that any students that didn't have internet and laptop access at home had internet and laptop access. So, we're suddenly delivering a laptop to their home. That doesn't necessarily mean that they knew actually what to do with it. No. But again, because so much of the classroom is handwritten based, their exams, there's English exams where they're writing by hand for 2.5 hours. I can't think of any job, even me as an English teacher, I don't write handwritten things for 2.5 hours non-stop.
I would drop off these days if I had to do that. It's a weird one.
Exactly.
They'll be using keyboards in every corner of their life, and yet not in the exam hall. I think some children get dispensations, don't they? If they've got special educational needs or other issues, they can do it on a keyboard. But you'd think it was fairly... Well, wow, what an absolute... Well, pardon the pun, Louise, but what an education this hour has been. It's, truly illuminating. And I'm so glad that, thanks to callers like you and others, we've managed to conduct it in a way that doesn't lend itself into... a demonisation of the youth. Karen's tweet about not being able to answer a phone because not knowing how to answer it. Now, bizarrely, I was also a junior reporter once, a little later than Karen, but I grew up in a journalist's house. I knew I could take a note from a phone call at about 5 or 6 years old of who my dad, who was it, get their number, what do they want, where are you from? You know, I even answered the phone in a certain way. My dad always used to answer the phone. He'd go, "Oh, Brian," the journalist back in the day. So that, you wouldn't think that was privilege, starting on a paper, knowing how to answer a phone. But if you didn't have a phone at home, let alone a dad who was a journalist, then you've got an advantage and a privilege that other people will need to be taught. Mystery Hour next.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
Hello. 3 minutes after 12 is the time, and this is your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. If you've got a question that you think admits an answer, but you can't for the life of you imagine what that answer may be, a frustrating question perhaps, or just a niggling one, then this is your chance to get an answer to it. If you... Well, actually, no, it's not for know-alls. I think the only know-all, really, on Mystery Hour, sadly, is me. Because generally, it's what I love about it is when someone rings in and says, "Oh, I can't believe it, I've been waiting years for this opportunity to come." So your specific field of expertise pops up. But equally, and I say this every week because it happens every week, it could just be something that you saw on the telly last night. Someone asks a question and you know the answer to it. The reason why you know the answer to it is often the most interesting bit of the whole Mystery Hour exchange. But the point is this: by 1 o'clock today, you will know more than you do now. Could also perhaps be the proud owner of a brand new Mystery Hour board game, because my favourite contribution of the week, and I'm afraid the management's decision is final, my favourite contribution of the week will indeed achieve that happy resolution. That happy resolution. You can find the full terms and conditions at lbc.co.uk, and you can find out more about the Mystery Hour board game at mysteryhour.co.uk. .co.uk's all over the place. I think we'll just wade straight in, shall we? 12:05 is the time. A good show today. I enjoyed it a lot. That second conversation in particular was... Well, no, they were both really strong conversations, but we might return to the topics in the second one, just looking at my inbox. There's a lot there that we still haven't touched on. My daughter laughs at me, says Patricia, because I put commas in my text messages. I believe that the kids call that dotting, Patricia, at least if you use a full stop. And again, you know, they might laugh at the way we text an email, just as we marvel at the fact that they do it very differently from us. But if you're talking about getting into the workplace, then it's going to be the older generation that, for the time being, prevails. If you want to get involved in Mystery Hour, you know what to do. The number is the same. Don't do... Actually, there's no point laying down the law, is there? No one ever pays any attention to me. Sally's in Thames Ditton. Sally, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
So my mum is 94 and she lives in a care home now and has dementia.
Yes.
But she's still able to have a conversation and everything like that. And I take her out as much as I can. And every time I take her out and then bring her back to the home, she says this phrase to me, which is home again, Washington. It's either Washington or Whittington, thou lonely citizen. So it's obviously something that she's learnt by rote,
yes,
at school or college, and she, you know, I just feel if I could find out what it is, then I could read it.
I think I know.
I thought you might, because you're so good at literature. I've asked all my friends, and no one knows. I thought you might.
Well, I think it's Dick Whittington.
Well,
you work that out, but it's the bells. It's the song that so after he'd gone to London to make his fortune. He was going back to Worcestershire, having failed, and the bells called to him to come back.
Ah.
So the sound of the bells, home again, Whittington. I could be wrong. I'll leave it on the board. I'm not taking a round of applause because it's far too important for any ego massaging on my front. But how far down that road had you already gone? So
I've Googled it.
Right.
I did Google it a few weeks ago, and Dick Whittington did come up, but I can't find out what is the...
It'll be a children's storybook that's not probably online. Do you see what I mean? I can remember reading one which probably would have been Ladybird, but if your mum's 94, she's 40 years ahead of me, 40 odd years ahead of me, so goodness knows what picture books they had then, but they may have sung it in class. But I do remember that element of the story of the bells, the sound of the bells encouraging him to turn again and go back to London and give it another go. And then of course he ended up as mayor, didn't he, Lord Mayor?
Yeah. Oh, well, that makes sense.
It's a lead, Sally, but we'll see if anyone can remember. So we're looking more specifically for the home again. I thought it was turn again. Oh, she might have misremembered, but home again, thou lonely citizen. Those. If anyone can slot those words into the story, they go straight to the top of the class, I think.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Lovely. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Sally. It's a lovely question. I really hope we can help with it. 12:08 is the time. Dom is in Epsom. Dom, question or answer?
Hi, James. Just a question.
Oh, phone line's terrible, but we'll see how we get on. Make it snappy.
Okay, sorry, mate. At what point does a war become a world war?
Okay. Yeah, I like that, actually.
Just want to know what metric they use to where it becomes not just
you might be disappointed. You might be disappointed. There may not be a technical threshold for a war becoming a world war. I don't know, but I shall put the question on the board. I think there have been more than two, but possibly not if it's the number of countries on each side, the alliances drawn on each side, rather than the amount of geography covered. So, the Roman Empire or Genghis Khan might have conquered a lot more territory than the Nazis did, but the Nazis were in cahoots with the Japanese and the Italians, and the Allies were I don't know. You're on I like that question. When does a war become a world war? And can we find Sally's mum's childhood ditty, almost certainly about Dick Whittington, with something like home again, thou lonely citizen in the lyric, in the words. Abu is in Tunbridge Wells. Abu, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
So, I was watching a program last night.
Yes.
And so in the Serengeti, for example, so you get these carcasses rotting away.
Yes.
And the tiger or lion, whatever, they eat the meat, but they don't fall ill. Whereas a human, if they ate that,
yes,
they would be ill. So how does that work?
Well, the obvious answer is that they're not humans. So they've got different. How can a cow eat grass? They've just got a completely different digestive system, but they don't eat cooked food. They don't cook food either, so the immune system is already stronger to process the bacteria in raw meat, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's I assumed, but I was just lurking in the back of my head, just trying to understand.
No, I get it. No, I'll put it on the board, but I suspect it's the same answer as raw meat. Okay. How can animals eat raw meat? I like it because they can eat. I don't think they eat the really rancid old toot, do they? They just, they're looking for a nice, relatively fresh hyena liver. But we wouldn't tuck into it, so just because we'd want to cook it first.
Yeah. Well, so this tiger was eating this elephant carcass, and it was just rotting away, but they still sort of, were chunking away at the meat.
Yeah, but how old was it? It probably wasn't that old.
I don't know.
You can't. Listen, you can't leave an elephant carcass knocking around in the Serengeti for very long without it getting eaten. It's not like finding something in the back of the fridge, Abby. The word would have spread on the tiger tom-toms that there was an elephant for the scoffing. I bet they don't eat. If it really hums, I bet they don't eat. When the maggots move in, I bet they're not actually eating it unless they're really, really hungry. But we will find out.
Please, thank you.
You're very well. You're right, not thinking of changing your diet or anything like that.
No. My heart is pounding because it's the first time I've called you.
There's no need for that sort of nervousness. How did it go for you? How did it go for you? How was it for you?
I'm still pounding. We've got
to get you an answer now that we know how much you've got at stake. 12:11 is the time. How can animals eat rotting meat? When does a war become a world war? And what was Sally's mum's childhood ditty about Dick Whittington, the home again, or what were the actual lyrics? Craig's in Bristol. Sorry, I lost my thread there. Craig, question or answer?
I have a question, James, if that's okay. It may sound a bit comical, but I've often wondered, when someone has sadly passed away, why are they then referred to as being late?
It's not only people who've sadly passed away. You still call them late, even if you're delighted that they're dead, Craig.
I suppose so, yeah. My question really is, what exactly are you late for when obviously you're no longer here?
Yes.
It's something that has always sort of been in the back of my head, really. My definition of being late.
Well, the best way to think of it, I think we've done this before, so I'm taking my round of applause, and the phone line's gone a bit south, unfortunately. So think of it as lately. So it would be late of this parish, lately of this parish, as in they were here not long ago, but they're not here now.
That makes sense.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Do you know what else makes sense?
I remember that one.
I'll tell you what else makes sense. The number of texts I'm getting now, as I knew I would, telling me that there aren't any tigers in the Serengeti. It was a figure of flipping speech. It wasn't an actual geographical safari-based observation. Thank you, Craig. Nice question. Round of applause for me. In your own time, Keith. Thank you. So we got the rotting meat, we've got the World Wars, and we've got the Dick Whittington. Abigail's in Clevedon. Abigail, question or answer?
It's a question, please.
Yes, carry on.
I've always wondered, how can you tell the accuracy of a mirror when you buy a mirror?
What?
For instance, my daughter's got a mirror in her bedroom, which we call the thin mirror.
Right.
Because everyone looks sort of supermodel-ish.
Really?
And the one that I've got in my bedroom, she always says, Mum, that's a fat mirror.
Are you serious?
And I went into a changing room in a high street store and tried something on, and the mirrors were really unflattering, and I thought, I'm not buying it. So I just wondered, how do you know when you go and buy a mirror whether it's going to give you an accurate reflection of what you look like?
I'm surprised this is the question that you've come up with, because I don't think, because it's not the question I would have come up with the same experiences that you just described. I would have asked, why do some mirrors make you look thin and other mirrors make you look fat?
Okay, yeah, maybe that's what I mean. But we don't talk about thin and fat because it's not PC, is it?
Well, you can use words like that, I think, without any problems. I don't know what other words you'd use in this context. But I'm just trying to think, because you'd think, wouldn't you, if that it was possible to actually create mirrors that were more flattering, you'd fill fitting rooms with them.
Exactly.
In order to... The ones in TK Maxx are terrible, Abigail.
I think that's where it was.
Was it really? Because I noticed that the other
yeah.
day. I tried something on in TK Maxx and I looked, goodness me, I looked a right old state. I'm not Mr. Sartorial at the best of times, but I didn't buy that at all. Okay, I'll find out. So, it could be a coincidence. It could be the light in the rooms. Could it? Have you swapped the fat mirror for the thin mirror and seen if it still goes that? So swap the one in your room for the one in your daughter's room and see if there's any...
No, I don't. No.
Well, what? You're not doing any experiments or anything? You're not doing the right research you should be doing before ringing in?
No, I'm just looking for a thin mirror for myself.
We all want thin mirrors.
Yeah.
There will be answers here, and we will find out what they are. Why do some mirrors make us look thin while other mirrors make us look a bit fat? 0345 606 0973. Or, to be fair to Abigail, we'll take her proper question, which is, how do you know the accuracy of what you see in the mirror? I'm not sure anyone's going to be able to answer that. It's 12:15.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
18 minutes after 12 is the time, and questions in need of answers include the following. What makes a war a world war? Why can animals eat rotten or rotting meat? Why do some mirrors flatter us while other mirrors do the opposite? And the Dick Whittington rhyme that contains phrases like home again, and thou worthy citizen. Can we get to the bottom of what it is? Quite a few of you are going jiggity jig on me. To market, to buy a fat pig. How does it go? Jiggity jig, home again, jiggity jig. To market, to buy a fat hog. Home again, jiggity jog. I tell you, I always think when I start catching myself coming out with that kind of nonsense, I always think of what it's going to sound like if you've just turned the radio on, especially if you've not listened to LBC before, but you've heard it's very good for political coverage and news and, getting the details on Brexit and all that kind of thing. Jiggity jog, joggity jiggity. No, we're not. We're doing Mystery Hour. If you don't know what it is, there's a board game. 12:19 is the time. Andy is in West Drayton. Andy, question or answer?
It's an answer. Well, I hope so.
Carry on.
It's the dogs and how they manage to eat all sorts of rotting flesh. It's the strength of the acid in the stomach is a lot stronger than humans.
Yes.
So it'll dissolve bone.
Because it eats raw meat normally.
Raw and rotting. I mean, our dogs, they'll run off with a bit of rabbit and they'll chew away on it, swallow it, and not a thing happens to them.
Have you got a Labrador?
I've got a Labradoodle.
Yeah, they seem to have remarkable constitutions, even if it's only half.
Yeah, we've got Whippet, a Whippet Bedlington.
Yes.
And she's eating the most disgusting stuff.
Yeah,
And
don't
she's
tell.
quick.
People are having their brunch at the moment. Let's not go there.
Yeah, no.
So what are your qualifications? Just your dog ownership skills?
Well, I used to sell a few years ago some raw dog food, and I was talking to the bods, the manufacturers, and I was asking them how come they can eat all this stuff. And they explained that the acid, if it'll dissolve a bone, it'll dissolve most things. Although I just did have a bit of gastroenteritis, so she thinks something even she couldn't deal with.
Right.
So, but yeah.
There it is. So I mean, a bit of immune system and a much stronger constitution.
Of course, yeah.
Great work, Andy. Guys, earn you this. Nice round of applause for Andy.
Oh, James.
Yes, mate.
I've just heard a cuckoo at Harmansworth Moor, if you're interested.
You've just seen one?
Well, heard it. I've seen there was at least one cuckooing away. I thought I heard a second one, but down near the British Airways at Harmansworth.
Oh, God, it's a bit far for me.
Well, A4.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I got a Dunnock the other day. I know that's not a very big deal, but they're so tiny and it's so quiet to get the microphone close enough to record it. I got a little Dunnock in Brentford. Yeah, and there's a kingfisher. There's a lad who tracks the kingfisher in Brentford. He's done a little exhibition about it, and I've glimpsed it once, but apparently.
There's 3 rivers through Harmansworth,
right.
And occasionally you will see them. A couple of months ago, I saw 2 fighting on a tree.
Oh,
but beautiful,
magical, absolutely magical. Thank you. There it is. Who would have thought it? Ornithology hour. They'll be doing that before they drag me out of here, kicking and screaming, as will surely happen one day. Did he get his round? He got his round of applause, didn't he? Keith is in Plovdiv in Bulgaria. I bet there aren't many Keiths in Bulgaria.
You'd be surprised.
Shut up. Really?
I appeared in the local newspaper. I'm a teacher, and I appeared in a local newspaper in an interview.
Yeah.
And the journalist did some research for Keith in Plovdiv, thinking there wasn't anybody else. And a friend of mine, also called Keith, his photographs appeared in the newspaper in my article.
Well, yeah, but that proves that there are 2 Keiths in Plovdiv.
There are 2 in Plovdiv. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Question or answer, Keith?
I've got a question.
Go on.
A curious fact about life in Bulgaria is people nod for saying no and shake their head to say yes in Bulgaria.
Gosh.
And there is a legend behind it, and the legend has it that under the Ottoman period, 500 years in Bulgaria, that says that when you've got a sword under your chin, you don't move your head very much. And that I've never been completely convinced that explains it, because the Ottomans were everywhere, and I've never heard of head curiosities in other countries. But it got me thinking, when and why was yes associated with nodding?
Nodding and shake, or vice versa, isn't it? I mean,
or vice versa, yeah.
And I'm more interested. I can't believe it. That's the second question today that I'm trying to edit and change, because I'm more interested now in why they do it differently in Bulgaria. It can't be because of the Ottomans, because then they'd be doing it differnly in Turkey and loads of other places.
So in other places, with that, like I say, it is a bit of a legend, but.
So why nod? Why nod? Yes.
Why nod for yes?
Why nod for yes?
Maybe there's an explanation.
I'm just trying to think. What Roman times? Nod. Yes.
Now your producer did say hone it into the UK, because you might get lots of explanations from lots of parts around the world.
Yeah, that's true. So we can't. It's just wherever you nod for yes, the origin will presumably be the same, and that might make it Roman. But no, you're on. Thank you, Keith. Keith, before you go. Give my regards. Give my regards to Keith, won't you?
To Keith.
23 minutes after 12. Robin is in Henley. Robin, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's a question.
Carry on.
My middle name's Keith. I'm not from Bulgaria.
Thanks for clearing that up, Robin. Go on.
I know you've
so were your parents were they chalk and cheese? Because Robin is I see Robin as quite an artistic name. I see, I think of Robin Hood or whereas I see Keith as a very solid old school name. So your parents decided to cover both of the bases with Robin Keith.
Indeed, they did. So my question, James, is I've noticed this for years, and then I forget about it. And then I thought, just been to Cornwall, and drive across from one county to another, and I go through many counties to do different routes each time.
Yes.
So it could be Wiltshire into Somerset, it could be Devon into Cornwall, or any variation on a theme. But then you sort of expand it across the country. You always see that kind of nice sign that says "Welcome to Dorset," "Welcome to Wiltshire," and always look across the road because there should be exactly the same and opposite sign when that road is crossing a border.
Yeah.
There is always like a 100 metres, sometimes a 200-metre gap between the two. Why? It doesn't make any sense to me. But I guarantee I've noticed it hundreds of times.
I have as well. There's a whole level crossing. I think when you cross at one point from Suffolk into Norfolk, there's a whole level crossing in what we would call the sort of no man's land, isn't it? That you're describing. Maybe it is a no man's land. Maybe you can just plant a flag there, Robin, and start your own kingdom, a kingdom of Keiths.
Or if you're just trying to sort of, if you've been up to no good and you're trying to escape the police.
That's it. Yeah, it's like the Dukes of Hazzard going over the county lines, like a modern-day Robin Hood.
Nothing to do with me. It's yours.
That's it. You wave at the coppers. You'll never take me alive, copper. I think the answer is going to be very boring, isn't it? And it's going to be that the sign can't be put. It has to be put in the best place for the sign. So, like corners and
100 yards, 200 yards apart. It's nonsense.
I'll find out. Why are the signs saying you're leaving a county, not directly opposite this? Also, the road might not be. The border might be on an angle that cuts across the road, like a hypotenuse of a triangle, and you're presuming that
I'll give them those ones. You know, if it's on the side of a mountain, I'll give them that.
There you go.
This is usually straight as a die road,
Is it?
And I don't get it. It's a really odd one to me.
Straight as a die road, but the county.
Sleep at night.
I can tell it's obviously bothered you on an existential level. This, and that makes me feel all the more responsible for getting you an answer. So why do the signs telling you that you're leaving a county and telling you that arriving in a county, why do they not sit directly opposite each other on a road? You're on.
That's the one.
I like it. Thank you, Robin. 12:26 is the time. Gary's in Malden. Gary, question or answer?
James got an answer for you.
Let's go.
About the mirror. It's to do with what's called perspective distortion, and to check that the mirror is accurate, you need to measure the glass with a very flat edge to make sure that there's no deviation from that flatness.
Okay.
It's like, you know, when you go down the old fun fair and you go in the House of Horrors and you've got those wonky mirrors.
Not for a while,
it's
but
that.
yeah. Is it really?
Well, it is. That's what it's to do with. So, you know, if it buckles in the middle, it will give a thinner perspective.
Concave. So that would be concave, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. The other way around, convex, look a little bit bigger than you really are.
And presumably it can, if it's cheaper, it's more likely to. Do you see what I mean? It's not. Is it done deliberately ever?
Well, who knows? Maybe some shops have got thin mirrors to.
Yeah, but you'd think so. But the one that Abigail and I both picked up on was the opposite problem. It was a shop that had. I'm feeling bad now because the PR for the shop is listening to the show and she's just tweeted about it. And I mean, it's my favourite shop actually. I'm like Prince Harry. I get all my clothes in TK Maxx. It's a wonderful store. But I do find that their mirrors make me look a little bit bigger than I am, a little bit bigger than other mirrors do.
Yeah. They need to have a look at their mirrors, I think, James.
What are your qualifications? What are your qualifications?
I'm a photographer, and this is very similar to what we have to look out for in perspective distortion on the edges of camera lenses that sort of make the pictures go funny.
You're on. And in fact, you've also answered the question that Abigail asked before I tried to edit it for her, which is to be confident. You almost need a spirit level, right?
Yes, but more of a flat edge. It's not necessarily a spirit level will give you level in terms of how is it horizontally or vertically level. What you want is a deviation from the flat.
Oh, so you just put a flat ruler on it and see if there's any wibble.
Yeah,
or wobble.
Exactly. And it's not just from the front; it could be from the back as well.
Of course,
if the back of the mirror's got that curve in it, you might see it flat in the front and the curve a bit at the back.
Round of applause for Gary. Beautifully done. I like that one.
Thanks, Jan.
No, thank you, and apologies to TK Maxx. I'm sure that it's probably just a coincidence. It's coming out to 12:30. I'm just going to read this quickly from Adam in Derby. He says, James, you're being very kind today. That's always going to attract my attention. He goes, that road sign question was the most boring in the history of Mystery Hour. It categorically was not. I don't know. I don't even want to start a conversation about what was the most boring question in the history of Mystery Hour, because I said something in passing the other day about there being one episode of Full Disclosure that I wasn't very pleased with. And the speculation has really discombobulated me. Because it's still coming in yesterday. People, I know which one it was. It was da-da-da-da-da, and it wasn't. So now I'm thinking, I've got paranoid now about you listening to all the Full Disclosures and thinking, well, that wasn't a very good one. That must be the one James didn't like. And then you send it to me and I think, well, I really liked that one. I thought that one was really good. So I'm certainly not opening up a debate on what the worst ever or most boring ever Mystery Hour question was. And I didn't think that one was boring either. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
It's 12:33. The origins of Home Again, Thou Lonely Citizen. Pretty sure it's Dick Whittington, but we need to find out because Sally's mum is singing it and we can't pin down precisely where it comes from. What makes a war a world war? We've done the meat, we've done that, we've done the mirror. I love the mirror answer. When did nodding your head become a sign of saying yes or a sign of the affirmative? And why do the signs telling you that you're leaving a county and the signs telling you that you're entering a county not appear directly opposite each other on a road? I think I might have accidentally stumbled into the answer of that one. I think it's a misunderstanding of what boundaries and roads are. There's absolutely no reason why a road would be perpendicular to a boundary, is there? So anyway, we shall see. Cyril's in Eltham. Cyril, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
It's to do with the Dick Whittington one.
Oh yes.
It's not exactly home again. But I know there was a folk song years ago called "Turn Again, Whittington."
Yes.
And in there it says, "Turn again, thou wisest men," or something. Dick Whittington, Lord Mayor of London. But it was from a folk song.
Turn again, thou honest citizen.
Thou worthy citizen.
Thou worthy citizen.
Yeah. And it was a song, but I think I could be wrong on this because I didn't do that much when I was doing it originally. I think it was around about the 30s. It was written a folk song.
That would fit, wouldn't it, with Sally's mum being 94? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to sound brutal, Cyril.
No, why?
But I don't know that you've added much to what I already said.
No, mate, I'm just confirming it, James.
Well, I need you to sing it.
I don't know the song. In my research, I never got the tune.
When were you researching it? Why were you researching it?
For my book, one of my books I had published years ago.
What was it called?
A History of London Through Beer Goggles.
So, what, you just wrote a history book while you were drunk, or you were drawing on pubs? You were drawing on pubs as part of it? Because I find it fascinating, the relationship between history and pubs.
Right, what it is a series of pub crawls going around London.
Yeah.
And as you go, I give you the route, and as you go from the pub to the pub, I'll tell you what happened in the street back in the day.
It's a brilliant idea. Is it still in print?
Yeah, it's still in print. Yeah, the third one's coming out this year, hopefully.
I shall look out for that. That's so far up my strata that you could almost have been writing it with me in mind. I'm so boring now. I've started boring my own children. They're doing history A-level.
James, I'll tell you what, if you send me an email address or
No, I'll pay for it. I'll pay. You're very kind, but I will pay for it with my hard-earned cash, Cyril. But I don't know if you get a round of applause. I could swap it for a Mystery Hour board game, I suppose. I don't know if you're going to get...
I'd have that.
Yeah, wide your neck in, pal. I don't know if I can give you a round of applause unless we actually nail it down properly. We need to nail the song down properly so that Sally essentially can sing it to her mum, don't we? Really?
Yeah.
I'll give you a round of applause because you've made me aware of the history of London through beer goggles, and that has improved my life. But,
thanks very much, Ian.
No, you take care. It's probably Turn Again rather than Home Again. So that, and then Home Again is the jiggity jig, I think. We shall see. Someone, I don't know. What have we got? Just looking for it. The song, how far back it goes, or no? That I know the story. I don't need that. But and the bells were saying, Turn again, Whittington, thrice mayor of London town. And thou worthy citizen. It's all there, but not quite for Sally. Elizabeth is in Motherwell. Elizabeth, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's a question.
Carry on.
It's maybe specific to Scotland, but it's about alcohol.
We should have more Scottish questions on Mystery Hour.
The little grocery stores that sell alcohol. We call them off sales, and that's what's written on the window, off sales. And it got me thinking, what does that mean? Where did that come from? Off sales?
Oh, I know this.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Tell me then.
It's for drinking off the premises.
Ah, really? Yeah. Is it as simple as that?
Yeah, it is. So there's a pub in Ladbroke Grove that's still got the like the carving in the it's the one on the corner of Holland Park and Ladbroke Grove. I forget what it's called. It's a lovely pub, big old-fashioned gym palace, a lovely old pub. And it's still got the off, it may even say off sales rather than off license, but it would be a separate part of the pub where you could buy a take-home, you see. You sound disappointed. You sound disappointed.
Well, your producer said you would know it, and you're a man of knowledge.
Yeah,
so there
a bit
you
worried
go.
about that. What do you mean the producer said I would know it? It's just because it's booze-related or something like that? Or no, it's because it's history, you see. Social history, Elizabeth, that's my thing.
Right.
I'll tell you,
Okay.
but Cyril would have known it with his book, History of London Through Beer Goggles. But why it's off sales in Scotland and off licences in England, I do not know. But it is the same. It's an off sales licence, isn't it? Round of applause for me. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lee's in the Forest of Dean. Lee, question or answer?
Hi, it's a question, please.
Carry on.
If I was to walk a mile down a steep hill,
down,
and then walk a mile back up the same hill,
yeah,
how much energy would I use comparatively to walking 2 miles on the flat?
What sort of a question
more
is
or
that?
the same. Well,
it depends all at the same pace.
Old and my BMI is going up, my metabolism's slowing down. I need to do more than 10,000 a day. And when I walk my dogs every morning, I'm going down a very steep hill in the forest, and then I walk back up the tramway.
Yeah.
And I just want to know if I'm using more energy doing that than if I was walking the same distance on the flat.
Oh, I see, because you think that the energy going down the hill is lower than on the flat and up the hill is higher, and therefore
I think there's a possibility in physics.
I don't.
If I was spherical, for example, and frictionless,
yes,
would I use more or less energy?
If you want to be spherical, I can recommend the mirrors at TK Maxx, Lee.
Yeah, and if I want to be spherical, I'll stop all the exercise completely. But
I don't. It's the mitre.
Pure physics. What's the answer? That's my real question.
Yeah.
If you roll a ball down a 45-degree meter, down a 45-degree angle for a meter.
No, I know that, but you're not a ball.
No,
No, I know that, but you're not a ball, are you? And you need a different. You're just making sure you don't fall over or get or means you're using muscles. So we just need
more energy than on the flat.
Yeah, you might be doing. I'm 99% certain that going up and down a hill is going to use more energy than staying on the flat. But we want a definitive answer.
I'd like an answer to the physics question. Really, that's the real question.
Well, all three bits of it then.
Yeah, if you were to roll a ball down a metre and then back up the same metre, does it use the same energy?
No, that's not your question. You can't change it now.
Yeah, but I am pretty spherical.
Well, you're clearly not spherical enough. I can't do... No, of course it doesn't use the same energy. It's gravity, mate.
Fighting gravity.
No, you're spoiling it now. I only just got my head around the original question. Now you're bringing balls into it. Stop talking balls. All right.
That is my question.
So we're going up and down a hill. A 2-mile journey, 1 mile up, 1 mile down. What is the energy exertion compared to 2 miles on the flat? I don't know if anyone will know, but it's the first time ever that my notes on what the question is, I've just drawn a picture rather than written anything down. I shall write your name down, Lee. But I've just drawn a picture of a hill with some arrows. We'll see in about 15 minutes' time whether it's any use at all to me in trying to remember what the question was. Phil's in Swindon. Phil, question or answer?
Oh, good afternoon, sir. It's a question.
Carry on.
Right, it's about weather and pollen reports.
Yes.
So we've got a pollen bomb happening tomorrow, apparently.
Is that right?
And yeah, apparently so. And how we can predict weather because we've got weather satellites, but pollen, how do we do that? How on earth do they know?
You're suffering at the moment, aren't you?
Oh, definitely.
You're well bunged up. I don't know what you sound like normally, but you've got a touch of the Michael Caine's going on down in Swindon there, Phil.
Yes, I have actually, yes. So I suffer with it. My eyes can just about see.
Oh, my mum's a slave to it, Phil.
Yeah, oh, really? Yeah, so, yeah, it's not nice.
No, it's horrible. But how do they know?
Yeah, how do they know? What do they do? Obviously, there's no one out there shaking a load of like flower seeds or pollen or anything like that.
You wouldn't have thought so. Is it when you get the pollen count? Does it change around the country? Is it?
It just says high, low.
For the whole country,
high.
though, would you and I be looking at the same pollen count?
Ooh,
Swindon and London.
Well, no, yeah, I think it varies according to the region. But I just wondered, how do they know? How can they predict? Because there's
whether it's regional or national, it's the same question, isn't it? How do they count? How do they count pollen?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Because you can measure rain. You can measure rain, can't you? So,
You can.
But how do you do it with pollen? Just look at people's faces, their eyes, or how much they're streaming?
There's one tree. I've never worked out what it is. There's one tree. There used to be one on. Well, there probably still is. I don't walk up it as much as I used to. But there was one point on Chiswick High Road for about 2 days of the year. I'd walk past and my face would explode. And then 10 minutes later, well, not even 10 minutes, 10 shops later, I was fine again. It was the strangest thing. Must have been a very, very specific pollen at a very, very specific moment, and it'd be like being mugged.
And it's the allergy, yeah.
It is. It's a mad one. I shall try to find out for you, Phil.
Thank you, sir.
No,
thank you so much
sir.
indeed.
And I hope you feel better soon. And I guess you'll be staying in tomorrow, will you? Or what do you do?
I'll probably go caving or something like that.
That might work. That might work. Also, there we go. How do they count pollen? 0345 606 0973. I love the fact that I have a significant number of listeners capable of naming a pub that I've alluded to on the programme within seconds of me naming it. Thank you to Caroline and everybody else who's pointed out I'm talking about the Mitre Tavern on the corner of Holland Park and Ladbroke Grove, which still has, you may not even have noticed it still has the because it's carved into the stonework above the back entrance as it would once have been, the off sales or the off licence sign, which came up nicely. Someone sent me a YouTube of what we think is the song that Sally was looking for, which means that someone would definitely be able to sing it. I shall definitely pass that on to Sally if we don't get the answer on air. It is 12:43. Sorry, I just need to close YouTube now, don't I, to see who's up next on the programme. It's Stuart in Thornbury. Stuart, question or answer?
It's a question, James. Nice to speak to you.
Likewise. What have you got?
I've got steps and stairs. Why are steps outside and stairs are inside?
I don't think that's true.
Well, you don't say I'm just going up the steps to bed.
No,
is what I mean.
Oh, okay. Whereas you would say the steps at something like the monument well, that's inside.
Yeah, I thought first of all maybe it's because sometimes they're made of stone, and then obviously stairs are normally made of wood. Maybe that was something along the lines.
Yeah, that could be it.
And also the banisters and handrails. So the banister's always inside, the handrail's always outside. And I just thought that was weird. Why most people think that steps are outside and stairs are inside.
So Trafalgar Square is a good example. I'm just trying to think somewhere. I know you're in Thornbury, but I'm just trying to think somewhere where I've got it in my mind at the moment. So Trafalgar Square, lots of steps.
Yeah.
You'd never think of calling them stairs, would you?
No.
A staircase.
Yeah, could
be. A staircase. Hang on, it's coming. So a staircase is fitted into a space. A staircase space, and ergo a case of stairs that has been made and put in, whereas steps, as you've alluded to, more likely to be stone, not necessarily, but they're not fitting into it's there. It's not quite there, but it's there, Stuart. It's
You're trying to get the round of applause, aren't you?
Staircase is the key clue here. Staircase,
Could be.
Putting it in between floors. Between floors.
Could be.
You have a staircase between two floors, whereas steps are not between two floors, are they?
No, that's
it,
right,
mate. That's it.
You think that's what it is?
That's what it is.
Well, just to throw you a curveball quickly.
What?
A lot of people wear, smartwatches these days.
They do.
Track your steps.
Yes.
But if you have an app with that smartwatch, it will also give you the equivalent in how many flights of stairs you've climbed.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you live and learn. But that doesn't. That's flights of stairs. You see, they go from one level to another. Very specific job done by a staircase or a flight of stairs. Whereas
but you've taken steps to climb them.
Steps, yeah, you take a step to climb a stair, but the steps that you go up and down at the actual physical entity that is a step is not going to be linking one floor to another. Above each other as well, remember. Stairs go above, they're like stacked on top of each other, whereas steps might go from one level to another. So if you had a big house, right, and you had an atrium that was higher or lower than the rest of the room, they would be steps, not stairs. So it's stairs linking vertically stacked levels.
Wow.
A massive round of applause for me, please. Someone's going to ring. I'll give it 5 seconds before someone rings in to tell me that I've got it wrong, but I shall enjoy the moment while it lasts.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
12:50 is the time. It's not easy being a radio producer. Do you know what just happened there? Eleanor had 2 people ready to come on the programme and sing the Dick Whittington song that we've been searching for since the top of the show, top of the hour. Top of Mystery Hour. And then in the space of one commercial break, they both cried off. One got very busy at work and one was on a motorway and wouldn't be able to pull over. So we were actually going to do it in the round because it seems that the song that we're talking about, which is a sort of 17th, 18th century broadside ballad, it is performed in the round. So you know what that means, like London's Burning. You start and then you get to, and then I start, and we're doing it at the same time at different points in the song. But both of them have cried off, and we've only got 8 minutes left. We need someone, ideally 2 people, who can actually sing Turn Again Whittington. I found a link to that we will send to Sally, so hopefully this is it. But it's not Home Again, it's Turn Again. But it is Thou Lonely, Thou Worthy Citizen. Anyway, when does a war become a world war? When did nodding, why does nodding denote saying yes? Why do the signs between counties not correspond, i.e. the sign saying you're leaving one county and the sign saying you're arriving in another one are not directly opposite each other on the road? We've done off sales. Does it take more energy to walk a mile up a hill and a mile down a hill, or less energy than it does to walk 2 miles on the flat? How do they count pollen? And I've done the steps and stairs, and I will not be admitting any steward's inquiries on that, I don't think. Lewis is in Putney. Lewis, question or answer?
Steward's inquiry about the Serengeti.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, nothing to do with me. Well, go on. What did he get wrong?
Dogs don't have stronger stomach acid than humans. They actually produce more. So there are very few animals...
Hair splitting. Isn't it?
It's because animals like dogs and other, let's say a primate, eats more raw meat. They have the genes to deal with it and to process that diet. Humans, because for hundreds of thousands of years have been eating cooked food, have lost those genes, and we don't have them anymore. So we don't produce as much stomach acid. We don't have the things to break down the proteins to break down grass, and because we use that energy for our brains, effectively, because we don't need that energy because we put it into the food through fire, and so therefore our digestion is quicker and easier. But the actual answer is do animals get sick when eating raw food, rotting meat out there? They do, but they can handle more of it than we can.
There it is. Qualifications?
Degree in medical genetics.
Of course, and a career in pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Round of applause for Lewis.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that sounded a bit. I mean, he actually works for a big pharmaceutical company. I wasn't casting aspersions upon the legality of his career. He's phoned in a lot. He's one of my favourite callers. Greg's in Liverpool. Greg, question or answer?
Answer.
Go on then.
I can sing the Dick Whittington with ditty.
Can we do it hang on, wait there. Peter's in Wallington. Have we checked it's the same ditty? Peter?
Hello, James. Hi.
Can you just don't sing it yet. Just give me the first couple of lines of what you think it is.
Turn again, Whittington.
Is that the same as you, Greg?
Turn again, Whittington.
Right, hang on. Stop. We're going to do it in the round. So Greg's going to start, Peter, and then you'll come in on. All right? So, Greg, on 3, 2, 3.
Turn again, Whittington, thou worthy citizen, thrice thou worthy of London, Mayor of London. We haven't practiced.
I don't. Yeah. Thou worthy citizen, Lord Mayor. That's it
Lord
then.
Mayor of London.
That's it.
That's basically, yeah.
Great work, lads. And that is. I think that Sally's mum's obviously with the home again. She's got it mixed up with something else, but that is the song. That is the song that she's looking for. How do you know? Well, qualifications, Greg first.
I learned it at school.
I'll do.
In
Peter.
the choir.
Peter, how do you know? What are your qualifications?
My sister learnt it at school when she was young, and she used to have the family sing it around the dinner table. We'd go around.
What a lovely pastoral image. A round of applause for both gentlemen, please. Next time, lads, we'll do a rehearsal. 12:54. 12:54 is the time. We've done that, and we'll get a copy of it as well. We found it. I hope it's what Sally's looking for, because I know that Home Again's not Turn Again, but it must be that song. It simply must be. We don't know when a war becomes a world war. We don't know why nodding. Lots of people sending me breastfeeding references on the nodding and the shaking of the head. But if it was something physiological like that, then you wouldn't have people in Bulgaria nodding for no and shaking their head for yes. I don't think you would. And the Devon Cornwall and the walking up and down hill and the pollen count. Still room for all of these answers. 0345 60 60 973 is the number that you need. We'll go to Mel, who's in Wharton in Lancashire. Mel, question or answer?
Hello, very quickly, it's an answer.
Carry on.
It's about the walking. To put a very, very long story short, the physics says 1 + 1 miles equals 2 miles. The biology says you're probably going to expend more energy. The physics is, I can't remember which law of thermodynamics it is, but energy is always conserved. So all you've done is transfer kinetic energy to gravitational potential energy, and then brought it back down again when you've walked down a hill. However, and this is where it gets interesting, is our bodies store energy in a very interesting way. We store it in a chemical called ATP, and our body consumes that energy no matter what. So, for instance, if you lift a 1 kilogram barbell up and hold it there, let's say 1 meter for the sake of making the maths easy, the physics says you have expended 1 joule, and that's all you're ever going to expend.
Got it.
But your body is going, no, I'm having to support this now. I need to clench my muscles, ATP, which is why it feels like you're continuing to spend energy.
And you probably are. I mean, in terms of calories, if you like, you will be converting more of that energy into that energy than you would be if you were on the flat.
Exactly, in terms of glucose, calories, ATP.
Great answer. Qualifications?
I'm an aerospace engineer, and I do a lot of study into A, how the physics of planes work, and B, how the biology of pilots holding back control.
That's a perfect qualification. That's a beautiful round of applause for Mel. That's really lovely. Quite an odd question from Lee, but a beautiful answer from Mel. I love it when that happens. Sal's in Paddington. Sal, question or answer?
Answer about nodding heads.
Yes.
It's the most stark, obvious version of semiotic temporal drift that you've got, because it started from pre-linguistic society when to show the top of your head became acquiescence. Animals still do so.
Oh my gosh, my cat does it.
Yes. So
what are the Bulgarians playing at then?
That is the difference between that's a societal implemented change, which is regional and so locked in that way. Whereas the rest of the world has done it because it's basically a transition from pre-spoken, pre-linguistic, animalistic behaviour that became that transgressed from acquiescence, submission to meaning yes.
Yeah, they did. Well, submission. Well, you've done it. Qualifications?
Master's researcher in psychosocial studies.
Serving you quite well in Mystery Hour.
It is, and it's nice to talk to you again.
No, likewise, and another round of applause for you. So I like this. I like these academic meetings. Have you put any of these discoveries to use in the real world? Yes, I often ring up Mystery Hour with my psychosocial. Do I need to pick a favourite now? I'm going to give it to Cyril because A, I can't wait to read his book, and B, turns out it's called O'Brien. So a couple of people ringing in to ask the name of the book. It was called London: The History of London Through Beer Goggles, A History of London Through Beer Goggles, by Cyril O'Brien. No relation that I'm aware of, but I'm going to give Cyril the Mystery Hour board game this week, and that is it. My apologies to Darren. 10 seconds. How do you count pollen?
You take it for a Burkhardt trap. It goes onto a sticky piece of paper, and you give it to a palynologist under a polarized microscope, and they will look at it and look for the counts of pollen. And the more pollen there is, the higher the number. And you have loads of these around the country.
But they're telling me what it's going to be tomorrow, though, aren't they?
I don't know that. I just you asked.
Well, have a round of applause. Have a round of applause.
Thank you.
No, there you go. Well played. That's it from me for another day. Don't forget you can download this programme and all LBC programmes on the Global Play. You can rewind live radio, enjoy the whole show podcast. All our shows are there, as well as the world's biggest podcasts. Download Global Player for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick back with you at 4. But now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 But